Valley Groundwater Authority. So I'm going to call to order at 10:02. So can we start with the Pledge of Allegiance? And Adam, would you mind leading us in the pledge today?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And thank you. Before we get started on public comment, I think there's some new members up here. I'd like them to introduce themselves, at least John.
Good morning. Can you all hear me? Is that on? Yeah. I'm John Vallejo. I'm the Assistant County Counsel from Inyo County. Been on the east side for about a decade now. My wife works here on the base for Boeing, and I'm excited to be here.
And you're filling in for Matt today, right?
Yeah, Matt is up in Sacramento at RCRC. He is the chair of that board for this year.
Thank you. And who else we have down there? Oh, we have some, well, everyone knows Don and Jim. And Scott?
Hello, I'm Dr. Scott Heyman. I'm a member of the Ridgecrest City Council and the lead rep for the GA. I've lived in Ridgecrest about 35 years now, and look forward to serving on this board. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I know we've seen you in the audience, but you haven't been up here before, John.
John Kersey, I'm the Community Planning Liaison Officer. I'll be filling in for Commander Benson today.
All right. Thank you. With that, I'll open the session for public comment. This is reserved for items that are not on the agenda, as you well know, and comments will be limited to 3 minutes. So please come up and state your name, please.
I'm Judy Decker. I'm from the Eastern Kern County Resource Conservation District, and I'm here to invite all of you, and if this is being televised, the people at home, on January 26th, which is a week from Saturday. The RCD is sponsoring a workshop that is going to be by Mr. Norm Schilling, who is a noted landscaper in the Las Vegas, Nevada area, which has a climate very similar to ours. He's going to talk about using drought-tolerant plants in your landscape, how to retrofit or how to start anew. I also would like to invite all of you on the 22nd of February. Dr. John Carlick is going to give a presentation for small agriculture, how to improve, but it can be used by the homeowner too, how to improve your soils so that it retains more moisture and grows plants. And I just had an email from our administrative assistant. We're looking at possibly having a workshop on our Sims station, which I told you about, which is up and running. We're looking at having that workshop on, I believe, February 8th, but that is not set yet. All of these workshops, the money for them has been provided by the grant that our RCD received from the State Department of Conservation. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy.
And I hope to see all of you there.
This is my name is Sophia Merck, and this is a little bit off point. However, it does affect us. We have many furloughed workers from the government that are not working right now. And one of the representatives is not here from BLM. And a lot of things happen in this county. We receive PELT funds from the Bureau of Land Management. We receive grants and contracts from USDA. And I would just ask this wonderful board here for a moment of silence for our federal workers that give so much to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I think we can do that. Just let's take a few moments. Just to think about all those workers that are out there furloughed right now and do a lot of work for us. Thank you again, Sam, for remembering them. Thank you. Are there any more public comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll close the public comments section and move on to consent agenda. The consent agenda has approved the meetings of the board meeting of November 15th, the 2019 meeting dates, approved those the third Thursday of every month, approved expenditures for RWG Law and DRI, and Stetson Engineering, Brown Armstrong Accountants, and the annual IWV GA website renewal. Financial, and are we going to go through these one at a time, Don? How would you like to do that? Or do we want to do them as a complete consent agenda?
Well, Jim can speak if I speak out of turn, but I think you can do them all at once. But I just want to make a note, the financial report, which Alan Christensen usually provides, he opted not to challenge the weather this morning, so he's in Bakersfield. He's available to call in. I've just texted him to call in and give that report if you'd like.
Okay. Is he on the phone now? Do you know?
I just texted him, so he should be calling in shortly.
Okay. And that brings to mind as well is that we were going to have Luther Snook was going to be on the phone. Is he listening today? Did he call in?
He was just going to watch the video since he couldn't vote. There was no point in him calling in, so he was just going to watch the.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Because he didn't get a chance to get on the agenda as a remote location.
Also, before we take a vote on the consent agenda, you need to ask members of the board and the public if there's any items they'd like withdrawn from the consent agenda for discussion, and if none are, then you can go ahead and take a vote on all the items.
Jim, there's a couple of corrections on the minutes, but I don't know if we need to pull that. For instance, it's just a minor correction on the minutes. Can I talk about those now, or do I need to pull it?
I think you can talk about them now. Okay.
So before I ask anybody wants to pull anything on the consent agenda, if you go into the minutes and you look at the where the voting record is, which would be in sections, let's see, I believe sections 7, 9, and 10, where in parentheses where you put the ayes and the nays, you have Peter Brown in there instead of Chuck Griffin on all three of those. So you need to change Brown to Griffin on all three of those. Okay. All right. So with that, does the board have any items on the consent agenda they'd like to poll for further discussion?
I had one, Mr. Chair. The billing. I had just one question that relates to item 9. So that would be the one I would request to discuss briefly.
Okay. Which?
So the billing that we are approving in the consent agenda.
Okay.
I have a question about one part of that bill.
And which building is it? Stetson?
It would be for WRM DRI.
Okay. That's the $14,850 on the consent agenda.
And Mr. Chair, my question just relates to the notes in the Technical Advisory Committee report where there was a model run done for the brackish water, and the model run was unusable, and I was wondering if that was part of the billing that we had in front of us today, and if there was any sort of dialogue that went between what the issue was with that model run and if we're being charged for it.
Okay, I understand which one you want to pull. Jim, do we need to pull that to do that?
You might as well go ahead and pull it. We're having a discussion like this. I would pull that from there and move on with the
consent agenda. You want to pull the entire approved expenditures, number C?
I believe you should.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to request that you pull that.
Okay.
So I was going to request that you pull item C2.
C2?
Yes, C-double-I.
Let's just go ahead and pull C, and we'll just vote on that as a block when it comes in. Is there any other items that we need to pull or just at this time?
No, but I just wanted to let you know Alan is listening right now, and he's available for the financial report.
Okay, great. So so the financial update, he didn't provide us anything for the packet?
I believe it's in the packet, but if there's any questions or if you would like to give a brief oral report, you can do that.
All right. Let's go ahead and get a brief report from. Yeah. Does the public need to have anything pulled from the consent agenda?
Renee West-Delusk, I just wanted to reiterate what you've agreed to. You're going to pull and explain each item and approve expenditures C, so everything's going to be gone over.
Well, we're just going to pull C, and so far we just have at least one question I know of on it. Mr. Gleason might have some questions. He requested C be pulled.
Can you pull all of the ones under C?
I'm pulling C.
The whole thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then, of course, we have the financial update as I finished reading the consent agenda. And the last one was approval of resolution number 0119, appointing Judy Decker as PAC representative for East Kern County Resource Conservation District. So with that, if we have no other, if we're not pulling any more before we vote on this, could we get Alan's update on the financial? Are you there, Alan?
Sorry, I am here.
Okay, we need to get some volume here. Try again.
Pardon? Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay. Is it loud enough for up here? Do we need to get it turned up some? Are you okay? All right, Alan. Do you have something on the financial update that you need to talk about or give us a report?
I can respond to questions that you might have. I think the spreadsheet we've given you is pretty self-explanatory, showing all the ins and outs, the balance available, and I'm looking at the Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority JPA fund. We have $354,000 available after the October bills. That's obviously enough to keep you going for a while. However, at the rate of payment to your consultants, you've got those funds will run out at some point. The other factor that you'll have to look at is what funds have been collected. These are just the funds in the county's treasury at this point. I believe there might be some other funds that have been collected from the pump tax. But I don't have any comments other than that. If you have questions, I can do my best to respond.
Just one thing I would add: if you look at the spreadsheet in the packet, October and November for the assessment pumping fees, those were budgeted numbers only. We've communicated with Alan. Going forward, we'll put the actual numbers in there. We do have actual numbers for October and November. The issue was the county wasn't getting the statements. We were getting them at the water district, but we've resolved that. Going forward, they'll be getting the statements, and they'll include the actual pumping fee numbers on the spreadsheet.
Okay, thank you, Don. Alan, anything to add?
I don't, unless you have any questions. Thank you.
All right. Do we have, again, Jim, if we're going to continue talking about financial, should I have pull that one as well? Or can we go ahead and just move on with it?
Nobody asked for it to. I think you're in position to go ahead and ask for a motion to approve consent agenda items A, B, D, and E.
Okay, then that's what I'll do. I'll request a motion to approve consent agenda A, B, sections A, B, D, and E.
So moved.
I'll second.
Tyler, second. All right. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about the approved expenditures. And the question that came up from John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just noticed if we look ahead in the agenda to item 9, there's discussion in the minutes there from the Technical Advisory Committee that there was a transport model run for water quality using significant TDS data from the brackish group. DRI had planned to present the results today, but it was discovered, and I'll summarize, that the model run was unusable, and I just wasn't able to discern from the billing if, one, that related to the billing that was in front of us today, and two, and if that was an issue that we needed to take a look at with regard to work being done that was unusable.
Okay, I believe that Don and Steve have been discussing this, so I'll let them go ahead and take the floor on here and explain what happened.
Okay. Yeah. First, answer to your first question, which is whether or not that particular work is included in this invoice. I think Heather's checking on it. I don't think it does. The procedures we have set up, because as you all know, we set up a mechanism whereby DRI would do this modeling work under an agreement with the authority, with us kind of directing the work and reporting to us on the work under an amendment to our agreement with them. So they have a scope of work on a budget. We've got it set up so that every one of DRI bills go to our office, and Jean, who is basically managing them, Jean checks those invoices before you get them and they go on this sheet. So Jean is working on that issue, and she approved this. So I don't know for a fact, but I don't believe that work is included here. I think this work includes work that was done on the test model run and the baseline model run that have already been done. So I don't think it includes this. So that should answer that question. I don't think it's in here. Is that correct, Heather?
That's my knowledge, yes.
Yeah, so I don't think that's part of this. On the other item, we are looking at that. There was work that needed to be done to sort of to QA/QC a significant amount of the TDS data that we got. And we didn't know it before we put it in the model run. When the model run came back, some things didn't make sense, so we went back and checked. And we've looked at that. That's all been done. The transport model is ready to run. We are looking at with Don. We're looking at with Don as to, reality. Sort of the reality look at it is what work would have been needed to be done to collect that TDS data, to use that data for the model, to make the model functional, versus what level of work needed to be done to actually go through and sort of QA/QC that data. So we're kind of looking at that right now. I don't have an answer. I got input from one of my guys, Steve Reich, who you've met here before, who works directly with Gene on this stuff, that he could actually see, because I talked to Don a little bit about it and thought, well, sort of this question came up, how does it really relate to the overall scope of work? And I got information back from my guy, Steve, that says, there's at least some of this, a portion of this, that it would be part of the normal scope of work, so not a big deal. But Gene is on vacation. Gene left at the first of the month. She's coming back tomorrow. So Jean's on vacation. I need to get her back and get her back involved in this, and we will resolve it before we bring it back. Does that do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
John, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Yeah, and Mick, you have questions as well?
No, it doesn't. My understanding is that we had arrangements with the Brackish Water Group that we were going to allow them to use our modeling, and we were going to have no costs. It was not going to cost us anything, and this $14,000, what I'm looking at, is something that should be paid for by the Brackish Water Committee, not the GSA.
This particular $14,000, I don't think includes work with the Brackish Water Group. I think that's still coming. I think that's still pending, those actual costs. This was work that was done before that.
So I thought the runs you made was based on input coming from the Brackish Water Group.
Just the transport run. The baseline run.
And the transport run didn't include these costs?
Correct.
Oh.
Did not. Okay. Did not include these costs. So it's still coming. So you're right. The arrangement is, technically the arrangement is, working with the Brackish Water Group should not cost the authority or us any more real money. The reality is there is some time spent in coordination that we have to do, but it's not a big deal. So that's what we're looking at with this additional effort, that with the TDS data, looking at it in that light.
Thanks. Thanks. Appreciate it. Clears it up a lot. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, in this line of thought, I think it might be appropriate for us to have a near-term future, in the near future, have a get-together where this board sits down and solely discusses finances. And I think maybe having a January, February, March type meeting where we all come in an hour early and dedicate that hour to reviewing all the financial aspects of our project. What do you think?
I actually think it's a good idea. In lieu of a finance committee at this time, I think it's a great idea for us to get into public and sit as a group if the board agrees, to do nothing but discuss finances, where we are, where the money's coming from, what the budget looks like.
So if that is something the board wants to consider, I'd like to ask the general manager to develop a plan so that we can do that and have a vote at the next meeting. So we can have a future meeting where we segment a significant portion of our time in the public solely to review finances.
And just to be clear, you want that part of this meeting
Yes.
within the next month or two?
Well, the people are traveling from a lot of different places.
Sure.
To get everybody here, I think it would be convenient if we do it the same day and maybe convene like an hour early, and for that hour solely discuss finances, develop an agenda so we review all the finances we've spent so far or that are coming in and going out, and then move on from that into the regular meeting.
Okay.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Any other comments for the board?
I'd like to confirm that this meeting would be open to the public?
Yes.
Okay. And where would it be held here, or?
Yes.
Okay.
As I see it, it probably would be we would probably open this meeting early, roughly, discuss finances, maybe take a short break and come back for the regular session. That's how I would expect it might work. But we'll go ahead and let the general manager put that plan together and bring it back next month for approval. I think. Any other comments?
Can I just go back to something Supervisor Gleason said, just to make sure you understand with respect to the model that was run? The contract that you mentioned with DRI, between the Brackish Group and the Groundwater Authority, was to specifically run scenarios for the Brackish study, pumping scenarios for the Brackish study. This transport model was independent of that. So just want to make sure you're clear that the model that was run had nothing to do with anything the Brackish Group requested. Okay.
Yeah, and to go back on that, you recall we had a discussion before about databases and the whole issue about databases and stuff. And one of the things we all agreed to at that time was the Brackish Water Group was developing a very large database. And what we agreed to do is make sure that we took advantage of that database in our work so that there wouldn't be a duplication of data collection, but we would have the benefit of getting all of the data into the model. That's where this comes from, is getting that data into the model. So.
Okay, before I go to the public, are there any other questions on or comments on item C, number 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5? All righty. Hearing.
Yes.
Yeah, you do.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm trying to catch up. I wanted to make a comment on the PAC, on the appointing letter E. Is that where we're at?
Yeah, that was.
CE?
Yeah, that you can make a comment. We've already approved the consent agenda, including that.
Okay.
Okay. All right, but you can still make a comment if you like.
I just want to thank Judy Decker. I want to take a minute to thank Judy. Where are you? We have 3 vacancies on that. Our upcoming 2 or 3 vacancies, depending on what thing. We're scrambling to solve that, and I'd like to put an ad out for the public, any members, any persons who would be willing to spend some time on the RCD in an increasingly important role on that RCD. Please see me. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. If there's no comments from the public, we'll go ahead and bring item C, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, back to the board for a motion to approve. Do I hear a motion to approve item C from the consent agenda?
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a second. Is this a roll call vote because it's finance, Jim?
No.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none opposed, motion passes. Thank you. All right. So I had a request that because of the weather and the timing and all that we move item 8, the imported water, RFP, RFQ, and water marketers presentation to just after the consent agenda. Does the board concur with that? Is there any problem? Okay.
We're good.
All right. With that, then, we'll go ahead and we'll move to item 8, imported water, RFQ, and RFP water marketers presentations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just kind of start things. And I think Heather, Steve Johnson with Stetson Engineering, Water Resources Manager. I brought Heather Steele here. She's sitting right there. I think most of you know Heather. I think she's going to help try to choreograph this to have it go smooth and move right through all this. We as a little bit of background for the board and the audience, we've been talking for some time through the PAC and the TAC and at the board level about the need to get some help because it's really not within our scope and our budget and our work to go out and try to find an alternative imported water supply for our groundwater basin in the Indian Wells Valley. We've been talking about that, and we brought it to the board. The board gave some direction at the last board meeting that we put together a request for qualifications / proposal and get it out to the folks that we know, and also put it out on the websites that we know they look at to try to solicit responses. 4 responses were received. We've got 3 of the responders here today. We've asked them to keep it to about 10 minutes of a presentation with questions from the board. 1 by phone. I think we're going to try to do the 1 by phone first, Heather? Correct. We'll do the 1 by phone first because they're out of Colorado, I believe, so they're going to do it by phone. But this is just for emphasis. It's been clear to us for some time, and it's been made more and more clear through our packet or TAC meetings how important an imported water supply is to solving our problems here. So this is a big step. I'm going to jump ahead between Don and I, jump ahead that what we're really looking here from the board would be some direction to staff, whether you form an ad hoc committee or you ask staff to pull together and send a recommendation to you. But the goal here would be, if we can, to have the staff come back through an ad hoc committee or however you folks want to do it, to be able to come back to the next meeting in February with a recommendation on a contractual arrangement or some kind of an agreement with some clear details that staff is comfortable with, not just me, this would be staff, comfortable with to present to the board to move forward. So that would be the goal at the end. So if we're ready, I guess, Heather, we're ready. I think we've got Mammoth Trading Company up first. Are you guys on the line?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I think we're ready, yes.
Great. Well, good morning. My name is Rochelle Young, and I'm co-founder and CEO of Mammoth Trading. So I'm so sorry that I couldn't be in Ridgecrest this morning to present our proposal in person, but really appreciate you making the conference line available to me. For a little bit of background, Mammoth Trading is a company that emerged out of cutting-edge research on agricultural groundwater use and trading. So we currently provide a variety of water management services for approximately 1 million irrigated acres of farmland. And our vision is to be leaders in developing grower-focused technologies and services that both achieve regulatory compliance and improve environmental conditions. I'll preface it, or I'll point this out now, that our proposal is perhaps unique in the way that what we're proposing to do is design and implement demand management programs and strategies within the Indian Wells Valley groundwater basin. Next slide. I assume my slides are up. Is that right?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So there is a lot of value to creating resiliency in your groundwater management portfolio with different but complementary tools. So, of course, supply enhancement, which is the main focus of your RFP, involves identifying available water rights either on a temporary or permanent basis, negotiating a price and contract, getting approval from any state regulatory authorities, which can be quite complicated and expensive, and then working out any conveyance issues which may do construction. So importing new supplies, obviously offers a lot of certainty, but also comes at significant cost, time, and effort. And then when you look at the cost of water per acre foot, supply enhancement usually ends up being quite expensive. Next slide. So supply enhancement can help to bridge that 15,000 acre foot gap that you identified, but so can demand management, which really has a lot of benefits that you don't typically get in supply enhancement projects. And again, this is good. Each is going to have its relative pros and cons, which is what you want in a risk portfolio. So demand management is going to be quick to implement. It's inexpensive per acre foot. It's flexible to acquire water when and as needed, and it provides benefits to your local water users. And this last point, the point here is that any payments that you make for change behavior or groundwater use or or sort of additional supplies generated stay within the community rather than you sending payments out to folks outside of your basin. So demand management is this very broad term and covers just a wide variety of behavioral and incentive-based programs, which we'll touch on the next slide. So to sort of get to the punchline here, our proposal is that, in addition to exploring supply enhancement projects, that the IWV GA also work with us to explore potential demand management strategies within the basin. And again, these can take on a variety of forms. So I put some on the slide. So these are things like groundwater trading or transfers, allocation buybacks, incentive payments for reduced pumping from historic levels. You have outreach and education programs, best management practices, allocation design, pooling across space and time. You can have things like analytical tools that help folks to get better insights on how they can improve their water use and behavioral decisions. They're just, and again, this is just a flavor. This isn't the full suite of demand management strategies that are available, but, just to give you a taste for what's out there. And, you'll note, too, that if the IWV GA is able to secure import water, that it, too, would have the option to sell any import water on a trading program if developed in order to both recuperate costs of that water and to get the best value for it. So, for example, the Mojave Water Agency has a very similar program. Next slide. Okay, so our approach is to scope, design, and test a portfolio of demand management programs that are of interest to the basin. We take a very tailored approach to understanding local water issues, as we know that there are no two basins that are alike, and therefore no one-size-fits-all approaches. And so, in our experience, the key to designing successful demand management programs is that they reflect the particular needs and constraints of the basin. So our first task is to do the scoping exercise. And so this includes background research and stakeholder engagement to understand the potential needs and opportunities and challenges and even perceptions and concerns in the basin, both related to groundwater management as a whole, but also to demand management strategies. Then we'd move on to design of the programs. So this is sort of two-part. One is to work with IWV GA Council to understand the legal and policy framework that either supports or inhibits demand management programs. And the second is to work with IWV GA staff and its technical partners and to understand the hydrologic, economic, and community and cultural issues of the basin. And so, all of this is going to help our team to be able to design the best demand management portfolio that's really tailored to your basin. Moving over to the simulation, this is where we do field level simulations to estimate participation rates and performance and economic and hydrologic outcomes. And so we'll provide some analysis on the distributional and aggregate effects. And then based on on the findings, the IWV GA will be able to select a final program designed to be piloted. So piloting the demand management programs, will help with, developing the administrative guidelines and training materials, conduct in-person training, recruit eligible water users to participate in the program, facilitate enrollment, communicate program rules, expectations, prepare documentation, and then track the participation and performance metrics. And all of that will help us to then, finally conduct the final analysis of the pilot program. We'll survey program participants in their user experience and then analyze the program performance, both in participation rates and the efficacy of the program design, which include, cost effectiveness, hydrologic responses, and any improvements to the workflow that can be made. And then all of this will be summarized in final recommendations for a full implementation of a demand management program. And so we're looking at about a 2-year timeline spanning March 2019 to December 2020. We have a fee-for-service structure to total $270,000 over that period. Next slide. We have a really exceptional team with key personnel and some senior staff that will be working with us on this project. So first of all, we have Kirby Brill, a name and face that you might recognize, as he was the general manager for the Mojave Water Agency for 20 years. And so, Kirby, if you know him, is just an expert in understanding groundwater management needs, governance structures in the California water policy framework. Nick Brozovich is a water economist with global water management expertise and a focus on market-based incentives. Kate Gibson is an agronomist and water scientist, and she has exceptional talents in tech, product development, and data science. And of course, there's myself. I am a hydrologist and water economist with expertise in groundwater governance and trading programs. I've worked all across the western U.S. from Wyoming and Nebraska to Washington and California, and I will be the project manager and point contact for this effort. Next slide. So on behalf of our entire team, thank you so much for the opportunity to present our proposal, and we are hopeful to work with you soon. And I'm happy to take questions or to close out at this time.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the board, Rochelle, on this? Nothing? And we're very preliminary here. Correct, Steve? We're just getting some basic overall, and you're going to be looking for guidance from the board how to continue?
Right.
Okay. I don't, unless there's questions from the audience for this particular client, we may want to wait till the end for general questions to Steve because, again, these are very preliminary, and we have a long way to go on them. So with that, if you don't mind, Steve, we can go ahead and move on.
Thank you, Richelle. You're welcome to stay on the line. We have 3 presenters here. We're going to make these presentations in person, answer questions, but you're welcome to stay on the line in case we have questions after we get all done. So next, do we want to start from the top or the bottom?
Yeah, it's just going to be in the order.
Oh, okay. Oh. Okay, it's Todd. Now, you folks have met Todd before. We brought him in a couple of months back just to talk about when we were really looking at the need for imported water when it became pretty clear we need imported water. I talked to Todd, and he had volunteered to come up and just talk to the board, but this is the same group. So go ahead, Todd.
Is there a way to advance the slides?
Yeah. I don't know why they gave it to me. I'm certainly not going to deal with it.
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Jeff Simonetti with the Capital Core Group. I'm here with Todd Tatum, co-founder of the Tatum Companies, as well as Michael McKinney, who is the senior partner here at Capital Core Group. We first want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to present, and also get the opportunity that we had back in August to present as well. We were talking on the way up that it was no rain and about twice the temperature the last time that we were here, so it's definitely good to be back. So, for our presentation, we just want to walk through what our project goals are, give you a little bit of idea, more of what our project background is and our firm background. There were 4 tasks that were specifically outlined within the RFP. We're going to walk through how we would handle each one of those tasks, and then give you a little bit of idea as well on what our pertinent experience is related to this project. So in our mind, the RFP calls for an imported water professional services, but to get to that point, I think there's really 3 points. It's identifying water purchases that would make sense for what your community needs. Now, that may look as permanent transfers, that may look as leases, but that's a key component. But to get there, there's a lot of infrastructure behind that. First of all, we want to talk about transfer agreements as well, because to be able to get your water imported here, there's going to have to be significant partnerships not only with some of the other organizations like LADWP, for example, but working with the Department of Water Resources and working with other transfer partners that will be able to get you there. Finally, infrastructure to be able to bring that water to us is going to cost money. And we want to talk a little bit about how we think the organization and the agency can go after potential funding sources at both the state and at the state and federal level. We have three major project goals here. First of all, we want to listen to you and get your feedback as the SGMA process keeps going on. What do you think your water sourcing needs are going to be? And that's going to come in a variety of sources. First of all, we need to get a general idea of what that number is. We've obviously in the RFP we mentioned about 15,000 acre feet, but there's seasonality to that, and we need to know, is this something that you would need a certain amount of at a particular time? Are you looking for permanent water transfers? Are you looking for long-term leases? And those type of questions I think would be a more iterative process as we go along. We think there's a big government affairs component too. What we want to do is be able to leverage some of the authority funding with state and federal funding to be able to help you pay for this infrastructure. Because to be able to import water, you obviously need to have some type of connection into either existing aqueducts, whether it be the LA or California aqueduct. That's going to cost money. So we have some ideas as to how we can do appropriations at both the state and federal level for that. And finally, and we think most importantly, we want to reach out to the stakeholders, whether it be the members of the community, the members of the Navy, the agricultural organizations. These policy decisions that the board makes is, at the end of the day, going to affect you. So we want to hear from the community and from the stakeholders as to what they think are the important components of being able to build this water project. We mentioned a little bit about the team. So I'm Jeff Simonetti. I'm the Senior Vice President of Capitol Corps. I will be the lead for state and local outreach. We'll also be doing some work on the direct lobbying and community outreach, as well as the water purchases. My partner is Michael McKinney. He's the founding partner of Capitol Corps Group. He will be leading the component on federal funding, and he'll give you a little bit more about that, and as well as the community and stakeholder outreach. And I'll hand it over to Todd to talk a little bit more about water purchases and transfer agreements.
Thank you all. Like Jeff said, it's good to be back here. Just for a little background for those of you that weren't here in August, and I'll let you know how I got involved in the sort of the private side of the water industry. Back in the early 90s, my dad had a good friend who was at the time manager for LADWP on the water side. His name was Jim Wixer, and he had known Jim years before when Jim was the manager of all the Owens Valley for LADWP. My dad's family has been in the Owens Valley since the mid-1920s, and they have been leasing ranch land from LADWP since the early 1930s. And if you're familiar with that, those leases are on an annual lease that have to be renewed each year. So our family's got a very long history with LADWP, which, as Jeff pointed out, is going to end up probably being a major component to you achieving an imported water supply and having it be delivered here. How do we switch? To the right. Up on the right. So the question, why are we uniquely qualified? I think, due to the fact that myself with a long history of water transactions up and down the state, what happened after we got involved in the water industry through Jim Wixer's help, we specifically were tasked by LADWP to try to develop projects within Inyo County. And as you all know, politics in Inyo County and any new sources of water that might be leaving the county were frowned upon, to say the least. But that led us to finding other opportunities up and down the state. And my father at the time had a lot of contacts within the Central Valley farming community. So we did a lot of ag to urban transfers from in Kern County down to Coachella Valley, a lot of transfers from ag to ag and other ag to urban transfers in Northern California. So we bring that history and knowledge to the table. And with Capitol Corps Group, and the reason that we've teamed up and think that, why we're uniquely qualified, Capitol Corps are registered federal lobbyists and registered state lobbyists. And I've known both Jeff and Mike for a number of years through real estate development in Southern California, and have seen how well that they've done in procuring dollars on the federal, state, and local level, and also with the community outreach, which I believe is going to be key here to get all the community on board if you're going to go the route of bringing in an imported supply. As Jeff mentioned earlier, the water purchases is really just one component of what we look like, a three-legged stool. We could go out and find you all the water. If you don't have the funding for that water or the infrastructure, the stool's not going to stand. And if you don't have the agreements with the entities that can deliver that water to you, it's not going to do us any good to find the water. So we need to bring not just the water purchases, the transfer agreements that would go along with that would be a water purchase agreement, because, for example, if we go the LADWP route, LADWP, as you know, is a member of Metropolitan Water Agency, which is the largest water district in the U.S. We would have to have an agreement with Metropolitan Water District, LADWP, which would also not just be but the water could be purchased from, say, a Kern County Water Agency. So we end up having not just purchase agreements, we have wheeling agreements and transfer agreements, and all that takes a lot of time and work, and thankfully we've got the expertise to do that. Again, I've told you about the relationships that we have up and down the state, and with that, there's a list of some of the entities that we've done transfers for, and we gave you a list of past transfers over the last 25 years. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mike McKinney, and he can get into more about how Capital Corps and what they can bring to the table for us.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity. I am one of the founding partners. I'm also the lead for federal government relations at Capital Corps Group. Our offices are in Irvine, California, Washington, D.C., and Austin, Texas. We're a unique government relations and strategic communications firm in one respect. In California, we are able to operate at the federal, at the state, and at the local level. Jeff runs our state government relations portion here in California, as well as our local government relations. And that integrated approach is kind of what makes Capital Corps a little bit unique, in that we work all the way from stakeholders to Congress in one sort of fell swoop. In this particular project, we would be looking for funds both at the state level and at the federal level, infrastructure grants as well as appropriations and budget items that might go on. To give you a little bit of a background, to the right you said, there are some of our current clients. We work very heavily in the municipal, in the water, and in the energy spaces. So we have a lot of those particular backgrounds. I will highlight a couple of areas where we have had great success in bringing federal dollars and state dollars and even regional dollars into, and that's the Mill Creek Wetlands out of Ontario, California, a project that took from 2008 to 2012 to complete, and received right around $7 million in federal appropriations, $5 million at the state level, and total, I think you tacked the grants and everything else on it, and it was $25 million. The city of Ontario, California led that project along with 11 private developers. Those were the two individuals. High Desert Water District, we've done social outreach for them and community outreach for them, including working on their current large sewer project. And then I'll also point out the Ontario International Airport Authority, one of our closest airports, and we were happy to do some regulatory work for them. Some of the other energy companies that you see around there are private companies, and we've worked with them both at the federal and at the state level. Jeff?
Actually, Todd.
Todd. Oh, back to Todd.
Here we go. So our year one, what we project on the first task is to give you an initial market assessment on imported water supply. And what we envision there is to give you, for lack of a better term, a smorgasbord of options, whether that be purchasing permanent water rights, long-term transfer agreements, whatever is out there on the market is what we want to be able to present to you and give you options. After that, and as you decide to move forward, then we move into the community outreach, which Jeff and Mike are experts at, and ongoing meetings with the board and staff. And then if you're ready, then we commence the water purchases. And that brings up task 2, which would be the transfer and wheeling agreements. We've got a list there of the agreements that we believe you would have to come up with to make a water transfer like this successful. The first would be your water purchase agreements, which we could put under the draft or banking transfer agreements. And we envisioned, it could be a mix of banked water somewhere in the central part of the state, in Kern County, different places, that is there should we have dry years where we need to call on water that's already banked in the ground. The in lieu agreements, which would be developed should we use the LADWP aqueduct to transfer, if that's where the actual physical molecules of water come from, there would be an in lieu agreement with them, and specifically Metropolitan Water District, should we purchase water that could be delivered into the state aqueduct. And the in lieu and the wheeling agreement would also be with LADWP to wheel the water down, and a wheeling agreement to wheel it on the state aqueduct. So all of that, to say the least, will take some time. Luckily, we are experienced in putting all of those agreements together. So we believe that we can come to you monthly with a representation of who your transfer partners might be and what government agencies those might be. Next.
We've already sort of touched on the potential funding strategies that might occur. These would be both advocacy in Washington and advocacy in Sacramento. In Washington, D.C., these would be budget line items, probably in the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. Also, potentially because of the base location through the Department of Defense, or MILCON is what it's called, military construction. In Sacramento, Jeff, you're probably a little bit better prepared to talk about some of the potential funding sources, but it'd be straight line appropriations through DWR and potential grants through those particular areas. Of course, everything that we do, we report to our clients. We're very transparent in that. This is not cloak and dagger or smoke and mirrors or behind closed doors. We're telling you what we're doing at every step of the way, having you guys approve it. We all understand the strategy and the action report, and then we move forward and we execute that strategy. Then from there, I'll let Jeff deliver the fun part of it.
Sure. So we have our first year proposed costs. So we broke this down into a couple of different areas. So for consulting expenses, we broke it down by task, and we have in our proposal there with the breakdown of what our hourly rates would be, but the consulting would be based on that. In terms of our travel expenses, the way that we assumed what our travel expenses would be, we had an average cost for what flights would be, and then we used the General Services Administration for determining what per diems would be. In terms of making water purchases, when you see the 2 points of the asterisk at the bottom, the way that we would set up, for example, if you were going to be doing a long-term water lease, we would request a $10 per acre foot fee at the time that transfer would take place. So it wouldn't be something that would be speculative. It would be once the water is transferred to you, if that's something that you were ready to move on, it would be $10 per acre foot. If there was going to be a permanent water transfer, and let me give you an example of what that might look like. So for example, the Irvine Ranch Water District about 7 or 8 years ago purchased a ranch up in, I believe it's in Kings County, that had permanent water rights associated with it, as well as a water banking component. They have a percentage interest in the Kern Water Bank. Because those are considered real property transfers, those would be subject to a separate agreement, and they can't be done through a consulting agreement. So that's why we have those asterisks out. But that gives us pretty much the idea of what our general budget would be, and obviously we're open to consideration or questions that you might have. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Steve, do you have any questions?
I don't have
comments?
any questions.
Again, this is very preliminary, and it's the first go-around. Yep. I think we're just hearing what our options are.
Thank you.
We can move on. Thank you.
going down the list. Yeah.
He jumped him. He jumped him.
Good morning. My name's Rodney Smith. I'm president of Stratacon, Inc., and I appreciate the opportunity to share with you our ideas about your interest in procuring a imported water supply. I guess I'm in control of this. We are a strategic planning and economic consulting firm that's been specializing in water resources. We have negotiated transactions. We conduct due diligence on projects and investment opportunities, secure state and federal regulatory approvals, and engage in water policy discussions since the 1980s. I used to have brown hair, but over the years it's gray. What we do, I'm an economist, PhD economist from the University of Chicago, so we have a tendency to look at the economics and finance and policies context of a problem and develop transactions or projects in conjunction with the relevant scientific, engineering, and legal circumstances. So we take a really multidisciplinary approach. We have a tendency not to have it all in-house, but instead usually with clients' own expertise teams and these members in these other areas. While we work with some public agencies, a lot of our work has been with private parties, landowners, and investor groups. Based on our extensive experience, we're the sole private consultant to the Western Governors Association, Western States Water Council 1912 report on water transfers in the West. If you haven't seen that report, you may want to take a look at it. That was approved by the Western Governors Association, all the governors of the Western states, in terms of how to facilitate better use of market mechanisms to address water problems. Examples of some of our work. As I said earlier, a lot of our experience includes many transactions, investments, and valuations on behalf of private clients. Therefore, it's confidential, so I can't talk about that. But I want to let you know that, for example, in the last year, we've been looking at 2 acquisition opportunities in West Texas as it relates to sourcing water for the oil industry. We're currently looking at a potential acquisition in the Upper Basin to deal with some of the water supply challenges in the Colorado Upper Basin. But what we did include in our submission is something we can talk about because it's publicly known. The Imperial Irrigation District, which I'll give you a little more background on in a minute, we had working with other team members representing the Imperial Irrigation District, we did everything that we saw in your request. The Cadiz company is a long-term client of ours. I'm going to talk about the one study we did for them, which dealt with the availability of wheeling capacity to move water for the project. And also the Golden State Water Company, where they had a groundwater contamination problem that we helped solve through negotiation of transactions. This was a venture that started in 1995, and my participation culminated only a few years later in 2008. I represented IID in negotiating the long-term water conservation transfer agreement with San Diego County Water Authority. This is a large deal. It moves long-term 200,000 acre-feet a year with a 45-year term. We also had to manage through something called the Quantification Settlement Agreement, resolution of decades-old disputes between water agencies, including Metropolitan Water District, Coachella, Palo Verde Irrigation District, federal government, state government, environmental interest groups. I was responsible for all the economic analysis in support of those negotiations and actively participated as a negotiator and drafter of the economic provisions of a lot of these agreements, working, of course, with lawyers that were also on the transaction. At the request of my client, the board, I was instrumental in securing for IID a $150 million loan guarantee from the state of California through the California Infrastructure and Economic Development Bank. Also represented IID as an expert in hearings before the State Water Resources Control Board. And We also, once these deals came together, I helped negotiate IID's acquisition of 42,000 acres in Imperial County from U.S. Filter, which they had to go out and issue about $88 million of certificates of participation. So I've been doing this for a while. Okay. For the Cadiz project, some of their potential customers involve moving water through Metropolitan's Colorado River Aqueduct. So we were retained to study and provide an assessment of the risk of non-availability of wheeling capacity on the Colorado River for a period of 50 years. So we did a study. It was a risk analysis of insufficient capacity quantified by the underlying variability of the 9 uses of capacity that would be ahead of Cadiz. And we quantified that risk, and we also developed a risk management strategy and transaction structure in the face of this risk of insufficient capacity to assure that the project's cumulative deliveries over the 50-year term of buyer agreements are satisfied. In other words, you don't have a breach or shortfall. For the Golden State Water Company, my initial assignment was involved in the economic evaluation of the groundwater resources of their operations in Sacramento. This initially was a basis for testimony and litigation against Aerojet Corporation, which happened to have contaminated the groundwater basin. Shortly after the depositions in that litigation, there's a settlement of that litigation, where there is a structure of Aerojet contractual obligations of how to provide water in lieu of the contaminated water. And I testified for the California Public Utilities Commission on the economics of that settlement, and that settlement did receive regulatory approval. I think consistent with what you heard from Jeff and Todd, one of the things we have to think through is what's the best solution for our problem? My first job after graduate school was with the Rand Corporation in Santa Monica, where I was told as a young man, spend a lot of your time being sure you understand your problem before you solve it. Don't jump too far ahead with thinking you know what your solution is. You have to look at your problem and what your alternatives are. So as one example, as we looked at your request, you talked about right now you think you need around 15,000 acre-feet a year of imported supply. Well, is that going to be a firm supply, or can you take a variable supply over a multi-year period? Those are just alternatives. From an economics point of view, if you want to go with a firm supply, your prices you're going to pay for a firm supply are going to be much higher than the prices you probably can cut deals for a variable supply. On the other side, you need to have a risk assessment, because what type of variable firm supply can you live with to meet your objectives of your water resource management? So we have as economists are fond of saying, we have trade-offs here. Do you want the Lamborghini, or do you want something else? And these trade-offs between the benefits and costs should be assessed within a comprehensive framework. No sort of freebasing should be allowed. You have to have a disciplined process of how to compare your costs and benefits. And that will provide a guidance to structure transactions consistent with your requirements as well as the economics of the transaction opportunities. I think consistent with what you heard from the prior presentation, water transactions have many significant political dimensions. You're not only going to have issues or potential controversies within your own jurisdiction, but wherever you want to try to move water out of, you're going to have those issues as well as regulatory issues. So a strategy has to be built on the regulatory approvals and political support secured through favorable public policy justifications. Your best tools of persuasion will include presentation of accurate facts and sound analysis. Venues include use of white papers, fact sheets, public presentations, things we've been doing for quite a few decades now. A successful acquisition program requires a sound public policy discussion foundation. That will be especially useful when you go to the seeking of state and federal funding. for your proposal. But before you go too far down seeking your funding, you got to first figure out what you're going to ask to be funded. To that regard, there's we believe, based on our experience, there's 4 phases of development and implementation of water transactions. Phase 1, have to decide really what you're involved, what are your parameters, initiate initial marketing efforts, see what the opportunities are out there, conduct some preliminary due diligence on those alternatives, sort those who are not interested to those who are potentially interested, and start the discussion of term sheets that should ultimately lead to memorandums of understanding, not only on the transaction side, but on the willing exchange agreements. And as you start to get a handle on that, you should be doing initial consultations for regulatory approval, as well as once you have an idea of what you're trying to do, you have to start development of your infrastructure program. The point is, by the end of phase 1, you should have a sense of where your decision about where you want to go, subject to further, due diligence and work. Phase 2 is the completion of the definitive agreements and actual securing of your regulatory approvals. With that, you'll move into phase 3, where you can complete your infrastructure financing and project construction and 4 operations. What we sent you was just phase 1, because there's no use talking about phase 2 or 3 until we know where we are in phase 1. We in our submission have more detail, but I rolled up a conceptual work plan for phase 1, which is 9 months. And I think you're going to see some overlap from the earlier presentation. We have to get a preliminary acquisition development, initial marketing efforts, due diligence, start talking to people. People I like to get involved with are people that are willing to exchange term sheets. People who don't want to go to the term sheet level are a waste of time. And ultimately, as you start to figure out where the potential opportunities may be most attractive, start preparing memorandums of understanding, your initial consultation. Key deliverables. Out of this, we should have a good firm understanding of not only your volume, but this firmness issue. Is it firm or is it non-firm? What are the dimensions of it? Term, how many years? And then, since you need a long-term management strategy, you're probably going to be focusing on renewals as well. You have to figure out what's the delivery point you want to your infrastructure. Especially in the negotiations of the initial memorandums of understanding, there'll be a lot of work on the other side of the table on conditions precedent in terms of, a memorandum of understanding will get parties together, what they're going to agree to pursue, and you have your conditions precedent, but no one's going to be committed until other things are, satisfied. In the case of the IID San Diego agreement, we came into an agreement with about 9 conditions precedent collectively for both sides of the party, including working out transportation agreements under defined criteria, environmental review, et cetera, et cetera. One of the key things, and this may be also consistent with your earlier, is in our experience, a white paper on what you're up to is a critical piece of paper, and it's got to be prepared promptly. This is a tool that when someone goes and reaches out to a potential party, it's a piece of paper that they understand exactly where you're coming from, what you want to do, and it's useful, so that's something they can use in their own internal communication. Secondly, that will be you're better off positioning yourself on what you're up to, because as you go into the political sector as well, my experience has been you're better off defining yourself than someone else. The other thing is the initial marketing efforts. We have an extensive network of people we've dealt with in the past. That a couple transactions amongst private parties I closed, I just put out an email to 4 different law firms, and I had conference calls with 2 potential counterparties within a week. But I had the white paper attached to that email inquiry. We need to handicap early the different types of willing exchange agreements and regulatory approvals. so that we don't get too enamored with an idea that maybe has a low risk of, being successful. And of course, you'll have your term sheets and memorandum of understanding for both your acquisition program, which includes both the water and the transportation, and an economic model for the assessment of the benefits and costs of your opportunities. Because what you'll find is that as you explore out there the potentials, you're going to have all sorts of different types of opportunities. So you're going to have to figure out how to compare. One's going to be an apple, another's going to be an orange. We're going to have a peach. There'll be a banana out there as well. So to have a disciplined process of how to compare over alternatives, I think is important. On our work process, extensive consultation, collaboration with your general manager or designee is critical. When we were developing the San Diego transaction, we were in constant contact with staff and general manager. Given the multidisciplinary approach, I imagine some interfacing with your legal team. I understand you use Jim Markman on some of these matters. I've worked with Jim on many matters over the years, Richard Washington-Gashon. And obviously, I think there will be interface with engineering and hydrology work. So I think Stetson and I are not that far from each other in the LA Basin. And based on the experience of the board, the best way to proceed, and we're prepared, is to engage in an extensive consultation process with you. Not all that initially can be in necessarily open session, since it involves negotiations. But what we did in the ID situation is we had a series of closed session workshops where you worked with the general manager, and we came and said there's 9 big issues they had to solve in a contract with San Diego. So we would develop little internal confidential white papers on that to explain what the issues are, what are the alternatives available, and then go in a closed session and have a discussion about that. That is a disciplined process from which you can give direction to a negotiator. Because as a negotiator, just as everyone else has told you, and I'm sure Bob Bocock will tell you the same thing, as a negotiator, you want to be sure you're always doing something that is consistent with client's direction, and we don't want any misunderstandings. So in conclusion, implementation of SGMA, like everywhere else in California, is going to transform groundwater management in the Wells Valley. There's economic pain from allowed pumping below historical use, and that will have adverse economic consequences. I imagine what's bringing you to consider the imported water supply is the imported water supply can help mitigate those adverse economic consequences. So as an economist, the way I look at that, a successful acquisition program will ultimately represent an economic balance between the gains from maybe further acquisitions versus the mitigation of the impacts you can achieve from the water. And so this will be a venture in actually thinking about your water resource management challenges, what are the tools available to potentially solve them, what's the comparative benefits and costs of your alternatives, and from that, with a disciplined decision-making process, you'll be able to find the best answer you can for your community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
Oh, I'm sorry. One thing is I got directions not to talk about the fee side.
Oh, well, I think you can. Everybody else is.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
We can see it in here as well.
Yeah, we have it in here.
But I want to let you know I wasn't hiding. I was just told not to address it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rod.
Do I just advance? Yeah. Oh, very nice. Look. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, good morning. My name is Bob Bocock, and I am with Integrated Resource Management Incorporated. You've heard the task defined a number of different ways this morning.
We took exactly what you put out and told you back exactly what we anticipate your needs are. We believe that this is an activity that is supplemental to your water resource manager, and we have a long history and experience in doing this activity and working with your water resource manager. The Groundwater Authority has proposed to enter into this contract and is seeking deliverables within 1 year. You guys are looking for something by 2019. You've developed your groundwater sustainability plan, or you're working on it, and it's due in 2020. And a lot of the deliverables are required by then so that you can address those issues in your plan of 2020. So we don't believe you have a whole lot of time to investigate this. You're going to need to get in the game right now. The procurement consultant will coordinate on a regular basis with the general manager and the water resources manager, but ultimately we're going to be helping you negotiate these transactions. The current estimate is the 15,000 acre feet. That's basically how we understand this task. The Indian Wells groundwater basin, you have the obvious as to the location. You are in Bulletin 118, and in 2016, your agency was formed to address this task. Here's the important part. Integrated resource management. We're located in Claremont, California. We were founded in 1997 as an innovative and environmental business development and project management advocacy and marketing firm composed of natural resource professionals with extensive experience in providing solutions to water, wastewater, and environmental issues, both public and private sector. Our services include environmental permitting, water use, rate studies, natural resource-related business development activities, water resource evaluations, water quality program management, vulnerability assessments, and the list goes on. I will be the principal that will be assigned to this project. I have been actively engaged in the water resource market for the beginning of my career. I started in the water utility industry in 1979 as a treatment plant operator at the Metropolitan Water District. I was then a public works director in a Los Angeles suburb and ultimately a utility director in Azusa, California. In 1997, I ventured out on my own and began consulting with both public and private agencies. I routinely transfer adjudicated groundwater rights, state water project rights, and Central Valley, Colorado River for many, many clients. I've been in groundwater management as a water master appointed by the Superior Court of California in San Gabriel since 1990, and I'm currently serving on the board of directors of the Chino Basin Water Master. We currently represent parties in watersheds in San Gabriel, Raymond, Chino, San Bernardino, Antelope Valley, Mojave, Kern, Sacramento, Central and the West Coast basins in Los Angeles County, as well as the upper Los Angeles River, Santa Clara, Monterey, and Seaside basins. Those are all adjudicated basins, and we have activities in all of those adjudicated basins. We represent clients in over 200 watersheds throughout the United States and Canada. Here are your tasks. You basically said we need to define and secure imported water supplies for that 15,000 acre feet. We think that that's something that is not going to be achieved literally overnight, and we don't think you're just going to go out and buy a block of 15,000 acre feet and say deal done. California is complex, and there's a tremendous amount of competition for that water today. You're going to need a comprehensive portfolio to fulfill your needs of both water in and outside this basin, and you're going to need direct deliverables into this basin in order to fulfill that obligation. Your task basically has identified initially banking opportunities, long-term leases of water rights, permanent transfers of state or Central Valley Water Project water, or allocations of desalinated water. We think that was very insightful of your water resource manager to even put that on there because you're pretty far from the ocean. But there are desal projects that are currently available that will offer opportunity for you to purchase water in those and perhaps exchange those with agencies that can ultimately make that water available to you. Task 2, you're looking for someone that will negotiate and secure the transfers and the wheeling agreements with various local entities and water contractors, state agencies, and the like. Integrated Resource Management will arrange for those meetings, and we'll bring in the relevant importer water partners and identify the process of getting the water from point A to point B. IRM will draft the transfer and wheeling agreements. We have a whole file of past agreements that we can share with you and make sure we get you something that suits your needs. This is where you get a little down into the nitty-gritty with Task 2. You're specifically calling out the opportunities that may be available with Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. You guys know that's an uphill battle. You know, we're not going to walk in there and get LIDWP to allow somebody into that aqueduct. It's never happened, and it's likely never going to happen. But there are ways around it, and we can get creative with you, and that's what we intend to do. Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, if you think LA is tough, they're even tougher. AVEC is one of your better opportunities. We currently have a number of projects transferring water with the Antelope Valley East Kern Water Agency through a number of our clients and directly with the district and the other 2 state water contractors in the Antelope Valley. You want us to work with, obviously, the California Department of Resources, the State Water Resources Control Board, USBR. These are all agencies we are engaged with literally every week. Integrated Resource Management will secure potential funding sources in order to offset the infrastructure costs associated with delivering water to the Indian Wells area. This is kind of one of our sweet spots. We are not registered lobbyists, but we work with the best registered lobbyists in the country, and we work with them in what we consider kind of cooperative opportunities. And what that means is if we're going to go to Sacramento, we're going in with the power of local agencies, business partners, agriculture, industries, simultaneously. If this one agency wants to go to Sacramento as an independent organization, good luck, get in line. But if you go in with a group of people with similar interests, you're going to have much more strength of negotiating position. IRM will present potential funding options for consideration. Pending approval, IRM will initiate discussions with appropriate elected officials and departments at the state and federal level to determine the feasibility of securing funding sources for now and into the future. IRM will periodically report to the board, the ad hoc committee, and discuss the status of tasks 1 through 2. But we take the December 2019 date extremely serious, and we intend to fulfill the obligations of this agreement by December 2019. Okay, this is really about real experience. As a company, Integrated Resource Management, water resources procurement services activities for over 20 years. IRM is currently involved in the adjudication, allocation, and marketing of water resources in over 50 watersheds nationwide. We just participated in the adjudication of Antelope Valley. We have numerous clients in the AVEC adjudication. We've secured storage accounts, and as I said, we're currently wheeling water into AVEC into a number of our client storage accounts today. IRM currently manages the water rights and resources portfolios of Great Western Malt, ConAgra Foods, Vulcan Materials Company, Nestle Waters North America, Morgan Stanley, Shea Homes, Hunt Wesson, American Water. We could go on and on. This is actually a very limited group of clients, and their portfolios are not only in California but across the United States. We've done water resource studies for Kern County. We've done water resources studies and have acquired water rights and resources for San Bernardino County, are currently working with San Bernardino County on acquisition of additional water resources for the county, Bob Page. IRM is currently engaged in working with federal and other agencies to identify and secure potential water resource funding opportunities. We're currently working with Hannibal, Missouri, Martin County, Kentucky, Laverne, Tennessee, Corpus Christi, Texas, Morristown, New Jersey, and the Florida Everglades Foundation on federal funding sources for projects precisely as we're talking about here today. Now, why confidentiality matters. If you guys are getting into this, and Rod touched on it a little bit, it's not something we're going to sit here and say, here's the opportunities that are available to you. Working with your water resource management manager, your general manager, your staff, your ad hoc committee, we'd be happy to share with you opportunities we've already, having received this RFP, discussed with water resource managers in the area. Rod alluded to a number of times, we all know each other. Rod's an expert in economics. When I need somebody to do economics, I go to Rod. As integrated resource management and in my opportunity to work for ConAgra Foods, I started a holding company called Aqua Capital Management. I acquired and manage a portfolio over $200 million of water rights in all the basins I've discussed, and probably 45 you've never heard the names of. We purchase those water rights and we lease those water rights back into the market. It's been an extremely successful business. We are currently working on a program with Vulcan Materials Company, statewide. Vulcan Materials Company is the largest aggregate mining company in the United States of America, headquartered in Birmingham, Alabama, and traded on the New York Stock Exchange. They, by accident, happened to dig in all the alluvial fans. Guess where your best opportunity to recharge water in the state of California is? The alluvial fans. In working with our state and federal water contracts that we have, we're actually wheeling water from one water resource area to another water resource area within the same company. I currently manage the water rights portfolios for a number of confidential business clients who don't want to be caught with their pants down when the governor says, you've got to shut down 25%. There are private companies in this state that are currently maintaining water rights portfolios in their back pocket for that very day. So that's why confidentiality is so important. Experience is important. You need to not talk about this. You need to be engaged in this activity every day, and that's exactly what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, it seems to me that if the board would agree, I think the way to proceed is rather than look for individual questions on each of these presentations, I think you're asking us to discuss how we want to proceed from here. We want to continue down this road.
Yes.
So I think if the board agrees, I'd like to limit the questions about that concern rather than individual on all these presentations, because I believe they're your initial proposals. They can change quite a bit. And do I have any comments from the board on that? Would you like to head down the road of individual questions or just discuss the concept? Okay, with that, we'll go ahead and just open up the board for discussions at this time on the concept, the idea of proceeding, where we like to head with this. So, okay.
Just so you know, I've been working with Don on all of this too, and I think my view, it's really important that we work generally. I know all these guys too. We brought all this together. It's really important with the board to work through our general manager on organizing this as far as an ad hoc or where we go next.
Nick.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Chairman. Thanks. I got a couple comments. They don't drive to any conclusion. They're just thoughts that I've had sitting here listening to 4 outstanding presentations. I want to thank everybody for coming in. In many ways, you've scared the heck out of me. You've also opened my eyes. I see dollar signs all over the place that I didn't necessarily see before. I see a lot of stuff. But as I'm sitting there listening to all the presentations, it's apparent. Well, it's not apparent. It's I see the need that we have is we must augment our water supply. And I think that's a multifaceted approach on how we develop those augmentation sources, whether that's treating water, whether that's importing water, whether that's desal, or any other ingenious ways that we need to augment our water supply. I think importing water certainly is one of them, and we need to consider that. And I just want to talk about a couple comments each person made that struck me as insightful. Mr. Tatum talked about, used the words, we could find water. That made me feel good, because coming up from the other side of the mountains where I spend at least 50% of my time, this is also an issue over there. And they're as involved, probably more involved with water than we are and have been historically. And there's a lot of concerns about the availability of water and how it's going to be procured, how it's going to be delivered, how it's going to be costed out. And so this is a new world we're entering. And as I'm thinking back on the fact that we need to augment our water supply, I've been quite relieved this morning listening to the comments from all of the players. Mr. Smith talked about some really good points. I thought Mr. Smith brought about acquisition parameters, relationships, costs, flexibility, time time restrictions. All those are major issues that our augmentation strategy needs to embrace. I mean, we need to find out. I don't know that, we come out with 15,000. I think that we just wagged that somehow. Maybe that's too rough of a word. We came down and we studied and we cut 50. But that is, in my mind, not necessarily going to be a constant value. We're going to have to build flexibility into what we're doing and how we're doing it, and we need to have that flexibility into this augmentation plan. Acquisition parameters. And we're talking about that. I'm thinking to myself, my God, we have a tax base of 40,000 people, and we have a mountain to climb. And I worry about that, but I have confidence in our ability to succeed because of the ingenuity this community has always brought together. And if I look at the challenges, that they're there, but you also look at, the things that are working for us. The fact that we have the House Minority Leader is our go-to guy. The fact that we have the Navy who's keenly aware of our system. The fact that we have a community of all different people that have all different needs of water, they all want to contribute. Whether you are in the ag community or non-ag community or car washes or whatever, everybody wants to play, everybody wants to contribute, and we want to solve the problem. I think someone talked about relationships with LADWP. I couldn't agree more. I went down there and I talked with LADWP on the power side. I forget who came with me. But we went down and talked, and it was not a real good conversation I had. And then the lady who's in charge of the P side of the LADWP, she's from Ridgecrest. And still, I'm getting a lot of, not great satisfaction from the conversation. So there are challenges there that we have to overcome and we have to make and we have to go out and get. And those development of those relationships is going to be pivotal to our success, because I agree with you, LADWP is going to play a role. One way or another, LADWP is going to be involved in our ability to augment our water supply. A couple other things. The ranges, the people on the other side of the mountains, I talk frequently with some folks on the other side of the mountains who are big farmers, and they're big water wheeler dealers. And we sit down and have breakfast and talk, and I say, we're going, this is what we're doing, this is what we're thinking. And the way we're approaching the problem over here is completely different from the way we're approaching the problem over there. As many of you know, Kern County as an organization has left the GSA on that side of the mountains, and we're not participating because the structural limits of the design of the GSA preclude us from taking a position that does not put significant risk at on your tax dollars. So, which is completely different from this side of the mountains, what we're doing over here. But anyway, in my conversation with this lady, I'm saying, okay, one of the things, the only source of water I know of that we can tap into easy is the LA aqueduct. And she was, there's no chance. There's no chance you're going to get any water out of that LA aqueduct. And I said, what are you talking about? What do you mean? She says, we're not going to let you. So there's priorities and there's relationships and things we have to deal with to come to understand, and that's going to take some time. I liked what Mr. Fadash, who's one of the gentlemen, I forget who it was. Everybody had something of value, and I'm thankful you're all here and you've opened my eyes to many things. I'm looking forward to designing an augmentation plan. How do we go about, developing or building this flexible augmentation plan and designing it such that we achieve the success we need and the timelines we need and how aggressive we need to approach it? So I don't have any conclusions other than I was thrilled with the presentations today. I learned a lot, and I was impressed with each of you. And I'm looking forward to hearing other board members' comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Gleason. Any other comments from the board or?
Sure.
John?
Thanks. Having just received the RFP responses today, I don't have any substantive comments about the providers or the potential upsides or downsides on any of the individual providers at this time. And as a big picture question, I do smirk somewhat at this experience you had with LADWP. Coming from Inyo County, we obviously work with them daily and have similar experiences, whether it's from a minor contractual issue with the campground all the way up to water pumping for the year issues. But in addition to that, I think there's going to be another relationship that is going to have to be focused on for this big picture issue of import. And I don't have the benefit of seeing what was referenced in the Policy Advisory Committee's January 3rd minutes regarding the import study. But apparently that was posted on the website. I wasn't able to find it. But I don't have the benefit of a holistic understanding of what options there are for this groundwater basin to import water, like physically import the water here, and where that would come from other than the Owens Valley or Rose Valley. And so if there are broader options than just coming from the north, that'd be good to know, and that's something I need to become more familiar with. But absent being aware, well, with not being aware of more southerly options, or east, if you will, or anything besides north, I do question the wisdom of focusing on import for this valley, given the timelines that we're looking at with regard to groundwater decline, the shallow wells for the domestic users, the economic circumstances of those domestic users to find alternative supplies or drill deeper wells. Because if we're going to focus our efforts on import before exhausting our efforts to see where we can gain water, if you will, on demand management and reduction, I think we do a disservice to the at least domestic users in this basin, if not all of the users in this basin. Because, of course, in Inyo County, they have their own groundwater authority up there looking at these issues. They have their own environmental projects that relate directly with the long-term water agreement that aren't fully watered. They have their own non-long-term water agreement environmental issues that relate to water that has otherwise been reduced from use and export. And there are additional environmental studies that would need to be done, in my expectation at least, to have any sort of significant export from the Owens Valley to this valley or to this groundwater basin, not to mention the restriction that Inyo County has on exporting groundwater from the basin in its county code. So the idea of building relationships is obviously paramount, and maybe a really deep dive into the viability of even exporting water from Inyo County's perspective, let alone DWP's perspective, might be really something that should be focused on before we really spend money towards focusing on, well, let's import it because we can buy it somewhere else and trade it down the line. So those are some big picture Inyo County perspectives as it relates to the groundwater use in this basin, and I think they are something that should not be ignored, and I don't think they will be. But it's a real issue that will have to be grappled with, and it's something that is of high priority to Inyo County.
Thank you. Anything else for the board before I make comments? Nothing else? Well, first I want to thank the presenters, and I think they did a wonderful job. I didn't list all by name, but some things came up to mind that on the track of what Mick was talking about. If we're going to be looking at something like this, I think that as an overall picture, we need to have a company or a consultant first thing I wrote down was somehow assist in funding options and sources. Where's the funding going to come from this? How do we get it? How do we acquire it? Because we all know it's going to cost something. The second thing I wrote down was outreach. Obviously, outreach is something that we need to continue to work on, and anybody that we look at would be greatly appreciated that they assist us in the outreach process of this. It's absolutely necessary. Partners, we talked about partners, especially LADWP. There's no doubt about it that partners, relationships are, again, one of the most important things that are going to happen. Legal support for contracts. That's got to happen as well. I mean, we need all the experts we can to help us here, and I believe that legal support is necessary. Working with environmental groups. There's another one, and someone who's got that capability to work with environmental groups and lead us down that path and assist us with partnerships and requirements there. And, of course, involve themselves, engage in the overall plan. And I think Director Gleason said it. It isn't just imported water. It's going to be a number of maybe possible other bits and pieces of solution that are going to happen. And those are the important things we need to look at. And And that's what I would hope would be looked at when we're trying to decide if we want to proceed with this and how we're going to proceed and who we're going to select on it. Now, as a case of is imported water absolutely necessary, I think through all the years I've been here, all the studies I've looked at, all the meetings I've been to, I think there's without a doubt that imported water is absolutely necessary. When you have a recharge of roughly 7,500 acre feet and you're predicting you're going to use 25 to 30,000 acre feet, there's absolutely no doubt. You are not going to conserve your way to sustainability. It's going to happen. Are we looking strictly to the north for our water? I'm not going to speak out of turn here, but the answer to that is no. There's, maybe we're looking at LAWP as a wheeling process, purchasing water elsewhere, trades, things like that, which we know, as we've heard, are very complex, very complicated, and got to be watched with an eagle's eye. So that's how I feel about it. I think that this is a necessity. I think whether how we decide to proceed today is going to be very important. And that leads me to one other thing about our plan. One thing that makes our plan unique from other plans I'm familiar with in the state is one thing that our plan is doing is not just handing DWR saying, here's what we are going to do. We're actually doing some, or planning to do some of those things within our plan. We're setting out how we're going to solve this issue, not saying, well, we're going to look at importing water. That's one of our plans for the next 5 years. Or we're going to look at purchasing desalination, whatever that may be. We're getting into the nitty-gritty of what the solution is. So I believe that we're far ahead of the game in that respect. Because rather than just produce a plan, then all of a sudden we're scrambling to come up with the final solution of those individual items. I think we're moving down the road fairly quick, and I appreciate that. So with that, if I have nothing else from the board. Okay.
Unless anybody else wanted to jump in. I think it's obvious we need an augmentation strategy. And I think we need to assign some type of committee, some type of grouping to get people to develop at least the general outlines and give us the parameters of an augmentation strategy committee, and I nominate all the new guys. Sorry, Doc.
I agree with you. I think that, where I'm sort of leaning towards is to basically put this into the water manager and the staff's hands at this time to come back with the next recommendation. I think jumping into an ad hoc committee for the details is sort of ahead of the game. It might be their recommendation when we get into the deciding what the contracts or what the plan's going to look like. But I agree with you that overall augmentation is important. So do I have anything else from up here before I turn it over to public? Hearing nothing, I'll take comments from the public.
Hi. Good morning, Board. I have a few comments. I'm probably going to make a few people mad, but sitting here listening to this, I've been to meetings for over 2-3 years now. I appreciate the presentations that were put on. They were all very good presentations. But every one of those presentations cost money to this basin. And that's my concern.
Could you please state your name, Chuck?
Oh, Chuck Griffin. Sorry about that. At this point, I heard several of the presenters say that, we're only going to look at task 1 because we're not ready for task 2 yet. And task 1 is acquiring the water, where we could get it from, and, figuring that out. But task 1 to me is, what are we going to do with that water? We need to know that before we start acquiring water. We're going to have to build a treatment facility to inject water. If we inject it, we need to know if we inject water, if it'll stay in our basin. We're doing this prematurely. I do feel that importation will be necessary to reach sustainability, but I don't think it's the first answer that we have to look for. We have areas in this basin that we have additional water. We heard the gentleman say that alluvial fans is where the most water was created, looking in areas in this basin. We haven't researched that enough yet. There's answers if we go a little further to the south and we drill some wells and we use that water to start balancing now while we can. We're working with a desal with the water district. If that turns out to be new water and that can happen, maybe that will work too for some. But I think we need to, it's frustrating to come to these meetings and hear, well, the first presentation by the phone I heard, well, let's basically negotiate with other users, let's do trade-offs. And then I hear the same thing from these other presentations, but we're also going to include importing water, which is fine. But we have a pack and attack. And we created that PAC and that TAC to do that job, to talk to the stakeholders, to be intermingled with the stakeholders. And I think there's nobody better than this board and that PAC to intermingle with the stakeholders. We are a group in this community that is very tight-knit, and to have somebody come in from the outside and say, well, we're going to negotiate a trade with this, and it's taking everything out of our hands in this valley. And I think we have a PAC, we have a TAC that is science and engineering. That's what the TAC is. Let's look at the TAC and let's put some task on them. Hey, let's come up with a plan to look for new water in this basin, because there's water here if we can come up with a solution how to get it here. But to import water, I think we all agree we have to build the treatment facility first thing, and that's expensive because it has to be treated. If it's brought in through an aqueduct or through a pipeline, it has to be treated water to inject it or drink it. So that's just my comments.
Thank you. Anyone else for the public?
Renee Westelusk, I'm a member of the PAC committee. I have a question regarding the Mammoth Trading Company. They seem to be more focusing on actually developing a plan for us more than involved with getting the actual water that we would need and other infrastructure type development. So is Mammoth Trading Company a different company than these other companies?
Can Heather, I believe they all do the same thing. That's just their approach, but Steve can correct me if that's...
Yeah, maybe to help answer your question. From our perspective, I think they are a little different companies. They didn't demonstrate or express a lot of experience or involvement in acquiring alternative water supplies. As she mentioned, and most of our presentation was on demand management side, which is extremely important. So that was the focus, and I think you picked that up correctly. So I think they are a little different than the other three that presented that are more on the emperor. I think you picked that up correctly, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Raymond Kelso. I would like to share some information that I came across a couple years ago. It was a DWP report, and it was talking about their water issues. And in reading that, it was very enlightening, and the issue was they aren't about to share a drop. They are booked, and they are planning way ahead. They are looking at the Pacific Ocean to take care of their situation, and don't expect a drop from LADWP. All right, regardless. They are too powerful, they're too big, and we're not in the loop. All right? Now, brackish water, it's a drop in the bucket here. You guys have got to think bigger and faster. All right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Judy Decker. I'm speaking for myself. I'd like to thank you, Ron, for reminding the audience, I guess they all didn't hear you, that we're using approximately 4 to 5 times the amount of water that is being returned. And we have been doing this for a very, very long time. If our water account were our bank account, the bank manager would be having a very stern discussion with us. The only alternative, in my opinion, is water from outside of this valley. I know that we have discussed many times the fact that we were not going to get water from Inyo County because when Mr. Bob Harrington sat on this board, he just said it right up front. But there are other places to get that water. But I want to remind you that 2/3 of our state is a desert or a semi-desert. And while nature has smiled upon us and given us some rain here, we are always in a drought condition. And so is most of the other state, the rest of the state. But at the same time, more and more people are coming to California, and they all need water. And you have to take that into consideration. And so I urge you, form a committee if you want, or let Mr. Johnson bring you back more material. But proceed with this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Any more for the public?
Wes Katzenstein, speaking for myself. I want to state something which I hope does not need to be stated, that I would hate to see anybody, I'm sure folks all over the state are looking for water. I think it needs to be made clear to everybody as we move forward in this valley that we will not export a drop of water out of this valley, out of this basin, even if it stays in Kern County. I think that goes without being stated.
Yes. You talked about Kern County. We have ordinances in place, with the exception of Searles Valley, that water does not export out of East Kern County.
Great, thank you. Good to hear that.
Thank you.
And regarding Inyo County, I understand their concern. They brush the teeth of the dragon every day, living with DWP. I would hope that if ever we were to successfully brush the teeth of that dragon and work a deal where we perhaps were able to provide some alternate source to DWP for every gallon that we would take from Inyo County, that would not increase the demand on Inyo County. It would not increase any exports from the county. I would hope that would be suitable for Inyo County if it could be proven that it was not an extra gallon of water, it was just a replacement gallon. So that's an observation I'd like to throw in. Thank you.
And I want to thank you for that observation, because comment that I want to make is, in my wildest dream, I can't imagine LADWP giving us a drop of water out of there. However, as I understand from the professionals that are here talking about where water is available, the possibility exists that we get water somewhere else, it goes in their aqueduct, we extract up here. So you are absolutely correct. It's not that we're taking a drop for Inyo or Mono County. We're just going ahead and replacing it what they would give us. Thank you.
If I may, that's obviously a concept that academically makes sense, but I think the reality is if there's any incentive for LADWP to provide water to this basin, then Inyo County is going to wonder how we prove that DWP isn't incentivized to increase the amount that they would otherwise export based on the incentive that they get to transfer it here. That's a real thorny issue, and it's not something that is going to be answerable today, and it's going to be, I think, a long-standing concern of Inyo counties there.
All part of the plan, the concepts, and the partners all have to be worked on. So where would we like to head from here? Do we want to give direction to Steve and the general manager to proceed, to massage this down to potential contracts? Is that where we want to head with this?
Yeah, we would be looking for direction of staff. How do you want to proceed with this?
Yeah.
You're obviously not making a decision today, but do you want to refer this to staff, to an ad hoc committee? What approach would you like to take?
Yeah, Mick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'd like to see is the general outline of an augmentation strategy. It's obvious to me that we're developing this GSP, which is wonderful, but a segment of that is going to be this augmentation strategy. We need to have that outline to understand what we can do and what we can't do, and how should we prioritize what opportunities and develop the acquisition parameters and all the facets of a augmentation strategy. If that requires a committee, I'm all for it. If that requires general staff to do the grunt work to get things moving, to bring some possible recommendations to the board, we could do it that way. Either way is fine by me. Steve, what is your recommendation?
I think personally, I think that's a good way to go. A committee. I would really like to talk to the board before coming back to the board with recommendations. At least part of the board, a committee, a representative portion of the board to talk to. The augmentation plan will not take us long to get through. We can provide that first sit down, because that really is the context of the alternative / imported water study that we're already doing. I do have a correction. We're going to correct it later in the pack. That the alternative water, imported water study. The text of that study is not online yet. I think I misspoke at the PAC, or I misspoke at the PAC. I misspoke at the PAC that it was online. What is online, though, are multiple PowerPoints that include all of the technical information of the alternative water, imported water study that we're doing, which is in effect the framework of an augmentation plan. It includes recycled water, conservation, everything in there. So I think we could do that right away with the committee, and then in addition to that, work with the committee on a recommendation coming back to the board on looking for alternative water.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. How does the TAC and the PAC fit into that? The TAC and the PAC, members of the TAC and PAC, sufficient to provide you that expertise to develop that augmentation strategy?
Absolutely. The TAC and the PAC, primarily the TAC right now because it's technical. Once we get to a policy outreach, we're going to take it to the PAC with whatever direction we go. Right now, the PAC has been lockstep with us. It's been since March, April. Since March or April, we've been making presentations at every PAC meeting on our progress on that augmentation plan, you can call it. We're calling it an alternative/imported water study, technical memorandum or technical study. They've been lockstep since March. We've made presentations, PowerPoints at every single TAC meeting. So, yes, they're lockstep with us.
Thank you very much. I'd like to hear from the PAC lead and the TAC lead as to their capability to participate in the committee to develop this augmentation strategy. What are your thoughts?
Can I make a comment before we go there? First of all, I agree with your augmentation, and whether you call it augmentation or other things, because we're basically, I'm sort of addressing Chuck Griffin a little bit. I believe that what we're leading to is some kind of a variable type of agreement rather than a set amount of water, because we still have a lot of things to look at that will augment our supply. Whether it be a change in habits of who's using what water, or whether it's desalination, or whether there's, I don't know, alluvial fan community dams that could be put in. I can't mention what they possibly can be. But I think that we continue to look at other alternatives. There's no doubt about it. So when you're looking at this overall direction, I think we need to look pretty hard at the variable amount concept. Is that what I heard from some of the presenters? You can say, I'm going to buy a specific amount, or we may have a variable type of contract thing that we want to do based on our needs. Because our needs may very well change. We may find that our needs right now are 15,000 acre feet, but in 15 or 20 years, we may find out it's 7,000 acre feet. So, and I think that leads to the fact that we're looking at all those other alternatives, not just automatically saying everything's going to be purchased water. So with that, yes, let's go ahead, and I agree. I know Mick just walked out, and he probably wants to hear what the TAC and the PAC has to say, but I agree with him that I think that's where you need to look, Steve, for the committee you're putting together to bring back to the board the plan, the overall plan where we're going to have. Also, I believe that time is of the essence. If what I heard from the presenters, what's going on in California, I don't want to rush things at all. But we can't sit on our laurels and wait. We need to be proceeding somehow so we get at least our foot in the door or bookmark somewhere that people are going to work with us.
So now would be a good time to put Mick on the committee.
Yes. I'll say no. Do you, Adam, and do you understand what Mick was asking?
Right now, or do you want us to wait just a few more moments for Mick?
Well, we already assigned Mick the whole job. Oh,
that's
there he is.
True.
No.
Then I will say from the tax side, we have the experience, the knowledge, the understanding, of course, all with the basics of the education that's there to look at all of our options and provide those technical needs to our groundwater authority group. We can do that.
Yeah, I would agree. Is this on? Is it transmitting?
Yes.
Yeah. I can't speak for the entire committee as to their availability to do this, and I would not suggest that you throw it in the lap of just the PAC and the TAC, but that we have augmenting members of the PAC and the TAC that would be on this, representing the areas, the technical side, the policy side, as was talked about, the representation of the different pumping and using entities, which is the basis of the formation of the PAC and TAC. So, yeah, I think we can take that on, but it is a time commitment, and we should not be the sum total of the committee. It requires commitment from this board also.
And I agree with that. And we receive this information and also what our assignments and challenges are from the WRM, from Stetson, and they will provide that to us when they receive what is needed from the board.
Let me add one additional thing related to this. I've noticed over the past several months
I attend the PACs, or the TACs, and many folks do. There are PAC members in the room today, although it's not a quorum. We have observed the need to work more closely together 11 months away from having to submit a plan that is comprehensive, and there are so many topics that are directly related, both policy and technical side, that we can't do them iteratively month to month, back to forth. So I think this is actually a good idea, and it resonates with some things that we've been coordinating on through the water manager to have some of the same things on the agenda so we address them together and make progress more quickly and more cohesively. So I think it's good.
David, let me see if I get this. What you're saying is probably a good idea to get the TAC and the PAC together with some representation from this board, work with the water resource manager on a different schedule than you've already got about your monthly PAC and TAC meetings to discuss this augmentation plan, and that would help move the ball a little more systematically to where we want it to go.
Exactly. You're talking about an ad hoc committee. This is not something that should be done at our regular meetings, monthly spaced.
Right.
Double iteration back and forth. It should be maybe a subset group. It may be the whole group, but it's got to have the leadership and direction from those that make the decision, hearing the discussions in the room with us, not something that comes to us separately and then gets teed back up 2 weeks later at a meeting here with the process that we have to go through. That's too slow.
So as I understand, what you're looking for is sort of a combined committee, couple PAC, couple TAC. Maybe someone from this board, water manager, as a committee?
Yeah, I would say someone from the board and the water manager, and that's just me speaking.
Okay. All right, where do we want to head from here? Do we just want to put that task into Steve and the staff's hands to come up with that idea?
I'll make that referral.
All right, and go ahead.
And of course I would defer to the council on this matter. If we're going to create a formal committee, we'd have probably public meeting requirements there. There might be an option to have this done more at the staff level to decide who's going to be on it and scheduling it. And it might be a little more informal that way, but could have a reporting mechanism to bring it into a more formal forum. That might give some more flexibility with regard to the capacity for the individuals who would participate in this and forming an augmentation plan to actually get together and discuss. So just throwing that out there in terms of what we're trying to accomplish today.
I concur with you.
So this was an ad hoc, not a new committee, but an ad hoc.
I think what we're asking is that the water manager and staff put together that idea. In other words, what it's going to look like, how it'll fit together. Does it follow all the requirements of the Brown Act? Is it ad hoc? Is it open? Let's go ahead and let staff and the water manager put that recommendation together, bring it to the board. At that time, we can volunteer Mr. Gleason to be on it, and then we'll move ahead from there. Or one of us. I'm assuming you might be looking for someone from this board to be on it. So that's where I'd like to go from here. Just turn it over to them, come back with that recommendation after he speaks with TAC and PAC. How do they want to form it? Does that sound right? Do we all concur? Do we need a vote on this at all?
I don't think the board understands the direction. Yes,
okay.
We do.
All right. Any other comments before we move on? All right, we're ready to move on. And I believe we're going to be on number 5 now, Water Resource Manager Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the Water Resources Report. We've used up a lot of time already, so I'm trying to keep moving this along. I've got Heather Steele with me here. Most of you folks have met Heather. She's been working on this since the beginning. I will give you one note about Heather. We've been working with Director Gleason about maybe having office space in Ridgecrest, and I posed a question to Heather about maybe relocating, and her answer was anything's negotiable. So you might see Heather up here at some point. So
we're a great place.
Anything's negotiable. Anyway, Heather's going to do a couple items. I'm going to jump in later on, but I think she's going to do item 5A, B, and C in that order. And if we have really important questions, maybe we could do them after each one, or wait till she's done with A, B, and C, and then maybe take questions after we get through all 3 of those.
Yeah, I concur with that because I think we'll have some things going on with D. So A, B, and C, and then we'll have questions.
Okay.
Poem and our progress on the GSP critical tasks. The first thing I do want to point out on the poem is we have made a slight change in the format. This change was based on comments we received at the last board meeting in November. And what it is, we now have a column that shows percent work complete, which is based on the expenditures, and another column showing percent complete based on the schedule and the duration. There was confusion about what the percent complete meant before, so we hope this clarifies it. Keep in mind, the percentages do not necessarily, or they're not going to be matched perfectly, because not every task is going to have an even distribution of their expenditures. But by having both, you do have a better picture, a better understanding of the total progress on that task. Let me move this to this page 2. I'm going to be talking about the numerical modeling. That starts on line 36, if you're following along. The calibration and the baseline has been completed by TRI, and it has been presented to the TAC already. So currently we are on TDS and transport modeling and the modeling of our sustainable management actions. These are very critical tasks. We are going to be presenting some of those results at the February TAC, and over the next few months, that will be the duration of that task, and we'll be completing all those management actions. The end of that would mean would look like a final recommendation of our GSP management actions based on what we see in the modeling. Moving on to data gaps, that starts on line 53. I just want to point out we have had to push back some of the start dates on some of those tasks just based on other more pressing needs that are critical with the modeling. But those all still have a reasonable completion date, and we are still on track to get our GSP completed with those incorporated. And the last thing I want to point out on the poem, starting on line 97, is the GSP development. Chapter 1 has been distributed to the PAC and the TAC. We've received comments on Chapter 1, and we're incorporating them currently. After those comments are incorporated, we can certainly provide that draft to the board if they're wanting to see individual chapters as they go as well, and to other staff members for comment. So we are making good progress on that. And the next chapter will be Chapter 2, going to the TAC in March. So I can move along to the next one, so we can have questions later. Let's go through this.
I will point out, Heather, there was a request made that changes we make to Chapter 1 to provide both the clean version and a red line version. We will do that, just so everybody knows.
Yes. Okay, for Prop 1, as you know, the grant agreement was executed in September. Since then, last month, staff and Stetson had a DWR kickoff meeting where we went over all the grant requirements and made sure we were all very aware of what they're expecting from us, just administratively and procedure-wise. We have prepared a draft invoice number 1. That period was all the way back from July 1, 2017 through September 30th, 2018. So over a year, it was a large invoice. It came out to about $377,000 to be reimbursed by Prop 1. And they retained some until the end after we've completed all the final completion reports. So what we could be expected to receive back is, for this invoice, is $340,000. I do want to point out, though, I don't have a timeline as to how fast DWR will review and get back comments, and our experience is it's sometimes iterative to get to the final product where they approve it and write a check.
On this one, I'll just, for the audience and the board, because of the heavy lifting that was required for this first invoice to DWR, because it goes so far back, it's not a quarterly. First, to acknowledge the help of Don and Lauren on getting this together, because it was a huge effort. They also sat in on our meeting with the representative from DWR, where we had our kickoff meeting on what they were looking for. We were a little amazed at that meeting at the level of detail and what I would call duplication that they need in order to put this together. Just so the board can see, and the audience, we have extra copies. If anybody would like to see or take with you, we did bring a copy of the draft. This is the draft that's been submitted to DWR, a draft of the invoice package, and so we have those. I provide each one of the boards. I just wanted the board to have a certain level of appreciation of the level of effort that was needed to go through to get this first invoice done. It shouldn't be as bad going forward. We've been through it once now. I think we're pretty we're pretty good at addressing the concerns or the requests made by DWR, so hopefully this will go through pretty quickly. We seem to have a good relationship with their representatives, so hopefully it will go through. But I certainly wanted the board, and again the audience, we have extra copies, to see what that first invoice looks like. That's it.
Yes, so as Steve pointed out, moving forward, it'll be on a quarterly basis, and that'll significantly reduce our workload for preparing each invoice and progress report. Moving on to the pump fee and the status of that. As of last week, for registration, there are 46 registered accounts that are submitting their payments. There are 24 accounts that are not registered, but those are still, we believe, are likely non-de minimis and therefore subject to this fee, but they have not registered yet. We have been going through a process to continually identify if there are other non-de minimis users out there. There was work with developing the pumping estimates for the baseline model that identified some other users that need to be registered, and there was significant work done by the water district to identify the parcels that are likely non-de minimis. So our next step, we're preparing a process to develop a list for other field work and verification of those to get them registered. As of now, the pump fee has produced $132,000. Keep in mind the winter right now, there's less pumping, so really it's in our summer months, so we're getting the highest distribution every month for that fee. And then, we have been sending out delinquent notices periodically as necessary, and that's still in discussion, going to be in discussion with the board later too about the next steps for that delinquent notice. That's everything on this, so if there's questions on any of these 3 items.
Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for the board? Nick?
Yes, sir. I got an obvious question. What about the 24 accounts that are not registered? What are we doing about that?
The next step would be the delinquent notice that is going to be discussed with the board in closed session.
Okay. So we're going to have this conversation in closed session?
Yes.
Thank you.
Oh, I do have one quick question. Are we going to make it on the plan? I mean, you can look at the POAM, you can see where, I mean, we're going to do it, right?
Yes.
Nothing to stand in your way, right?
Correct.
Okay. I have a guarantee.
Yeah, every month we have to make minor modifications to the schedule based on how how things are progressing in our time, but everything's moving forward to January 2020.
Thank you. Good question. Yeah, pretty much the obvious question.
Right.
I can either open it up for any comments from the public at this time, or we can move on to the rest of the report before I do. What's next on our list? The well monitoring. Is Heather? Are you handling that, or
Steve is?
Steve is?
I'm going to do the next 2 actually, with help on the last one. But Heather can be available for questions if we need to have questions. Okay, this next item, which is item 5D, is well monitoring. This is associated with the technical support services from the state in regarding to drilling a well to start, but maybe multiple wells. I incorrectly call this a grant program. It's really not a grant program because it's services, not money, that the state provides. This came to us, your Water Resources Manager, through the TAC and some of the TAC members as an opportunity. We brought it to the board before, and we received direction to follow up on that opportunity because it's an opportunity to get some things done in the basin with some but very little cost local cost associated with getting some of these monitoring wells drilled in the basin. Because we've got a heavy workload and because we have a budget, we're trying to stay under the budget, in our budget as much as we can, we did request Don's help to work on the application. You recall we did put a general application in on this TSS program initially. It's a general application that is a placeholder. It put us in line because it's in time that they're submitted that you get in line and hold your place. So we submitted a general application for the TSS program for the authority. We worked on that. We got that done. It's in. It was accepted. The next step is to submit application for specific projects. We have a project that a monitoring well project that we're working on out of Don's office with Tim Parker supporting a consultant to the district, supporting the water district. They are actually preparing the application. Gene's providing some support, some overview to help with that application, some of the technical work to make sure we're all on the same page. But effectively, the level of work being done there is being done by the Water District at their cost. I hope you know that, Mr. Chairman. Just the Water District. Okay. So be aware of that. Anyway, the reason I can bring this back to you now is because in order to move forward, one of the directions from the board, and we agree with that, is that work on projects like this, once we get going on it and process it through the state and do the work, needs to go through the authority. In order to do that, we need to have some time that we spend on it to coordinate it with the the application with DWR, get the application processed, and then coordinate the actual work. So what we provided is a scope and budget that's not part of our original GSP budget. We provided a scope and budget. I guess it's for an action item. And the work items that we've got listed, and this is from Jean Moran, who's on vacation, but she asked me to pull this together for this meeting. Basically is to coordinate with DWR Technical Support Services Program. Project management and coordination, just to keep the program moving. Review and edits to the well construction TSS application. That's working with Tim Parker and the Water District to get that application done. Interface with DWR staff, Tim Ross, who's been here, to process the application, get it approved. Interface with BLM, permitting and access. When the well that we're looking at is on BLM land, so there'll be some permitting and access issues with BLM. Draft required access agreements with DWR, the authority, and BLM, whatever's needed to get access to drill this well. Coordinate the well permits, on-site geologists, geophysics, on-site geologists, geophysics. We've got a volunteer from Cyril's and the state to provide some of those services. We won't be providing those, just coordinating those to keep the cost down. Coordinate with the well development, sampling, and aquifer testing. That'll all be done. We'll be there just to make sure it's done right and we get it all documented. And then coordinate the well survey and inclusion of the well into the monitoring program, minor stuff, and then file the well report. So this is the level of work that we're looking at that as a water resources manager, we're looking at as additional work. We need to support this program to make sure it works. It's for a total of estimated $17,500 to get this all done. It'll probably be done over the next year. So we thought rather than just moving forward, it would be better to bring it to the board, let you know what we're having to do to support the program, and I presume hopefully get approval from the board to move forward. Anything, Don? Is that good?
So you're looking for approval for this estimated expenditures?
That's correct. That's really an unbudgeted item. And we keep a tabulation of all of our budgeted items and this task and the budget and the status. And we also keep in track of some of the unbudgeted items. Some of those include things like some of the support for the Prop 1 application. They are not being supported under the Prop 1 application. Some administrative costs, but some of it is. So we're keeping track of that, and this would be a part of that.
And just to reiterate what Steve already said, but the Water District's providing a lot of the services on this is in kind. They're not, no charge.
How'd I get into that? Okay. Is there any questions from the board about this? How do we want to proceed? Are we looking for a motion to approve? Is that?
He's got one more.
Yeah, I want to go ahead.
One more item?
Yeah, let's go through the last item.
We'll do the last item. Okay, the last item really, and I may be looking for a little bit of support from either David Janis here or Scott O'Neill's in the audience. You recall, and I'll go back a little bit for the audience. This was brought to the authority, to the TAC. I believe the PAC also has been brought to the authority of the potential for some funding through the Navy COSO project with some actual what do we call those? Royalty. Think of the word royalty. Some royalty funds associated with the COSO project. I'm not an expert on this. I know that a lot of work's been done by both Scott and David to get this opportunity, make this opportunity available to the authority. Details, questions come up, can certainly be answered by them. But there is an opportunity for a significant amount of money to be used for the Indian Wells Valley for physical projects that don't have to be on the base. They have to be in the basin. Support water and power. There needs to be a benefit demonstrated for the Navy. Certainly a benefit demonstrated by the authority. We're looking for projects that fit into our GSP. For this first round, just to review the process that we went through, working again with Scott and David, We produced an initial list of what we thought were priority projects. That list went through David and Scott first, then went to the TAC. The TAC looked at it, provided some comment. One of the requests, I'll say requests that both Scott and David had was that the list of projects and priority projects first be endorsed or recommended by the TAC to the board. So we accomplished that at the last meeting. It's in the minutes. Based on their recommendation to go forward, we worked again with Scott and David to develop some initial list of first priority projects. We have a list of probably 12, 14 projects. All of those aren't going to be submitted in the first year. So then we prepared a list of initial projects for submission. Went back and forth with David and Scott on that list to get them clarified, get a brief description of those, put a cost estimate together with those, and reviewed them back with David and Scott to produce what we have today is a list of the first priority projects. I'll talk about Scott in just a minute, but and I want to emphasize that one of the goals in this first list of projects that I understand, again, I'm not the expert on this Navy coastal potential funding process, but one of the things that I think is most important to express to everybody is our first list of projects. The goal of this first list is hopefully our goal is to make them as much of slam dunk projects as we can in coordination with the Navy, because this is a new effort. If we're able to find projects and develop projects and present projects that the Navy can see a benefit for and endorse and approve and process and get the funding and get the process moving, the feeling, at least that I'm getting, is the next round will go easier and we have a little more latitude on what projects we want to actually fund. From my mind, I'll tell everybody right now, from my mind, I think most people that I've talked to agree, our highest priority projects right now are imported water infrastructure. We are working on shallow well impacts and impacts to domestic wells and how to mitigate those. Those are extremely high, important projects for funding. However, we're not far enough along on either one of those to make an application to the Navy to support those right now. But they're very, very high on our list. We put projects together that emphasize data gathering and information gathering to help us understand the basin and produce a better GSP. So there are monitoring well projects. There's some subsidence projects in there. There's efforts to further define what our replenishment is. Right now, we've determined through our ad hoc group what the replenishment is, but these monitoring wells will help us define that and confirm that a little better. Also, where water's leaving the basin, potential water that leaves the basin that we're losing. We've got identified monitoring wells that will help us identify that to help us get a better understanding of water balance. So these are real projects that are in the field that are going to help us not only with the GSP, but going forward to manage the basin. So that's the list of projects we put together. On the Scott O'Neill side, as we were working on the project, Scott volunteered to draft the letter that would go on the authority letterhead for us to collaborate and review on and make sure it was complete. Scott did draft that letter. We collaborated with it. We got together, finalized it, and that's what you have in your board packet is a draft letter along with a listing of the projects that are being requested at this time. And what we're looking for right now is certainly any questions or comments they have around it. And again, David and Scott are here to answer the bigger questions, but looking for the board to approve putting that letter on authority letterhead. And my understanding would then we would be working with David and Scott to start processing it through the Navy.
Thank you, Steve. What I'd like to do, if the board agrees, is basically items A, B, and C are report items, correct? And in item D, well monitoring, we'll take a little bit of discussion because you're looking at approval for the board.
Correct.
And so will E. Correct? So unless legal tells me otherwise, I think what I'd like to do is you recommend A, B, and C just be accepted and filed at this particular point. Is that agreed for the board? Okay. And then so we can then move on to a discussion for the well monitoring cost. And you're looking for a motion to approve proceeding on that, I take it.
Correct.
Okay. Is that true?
You still might want to give the public or the board an opportunity to ask any questions they have on A, B, or C, even though they aren't action items.
Yeah, I was going to. I just want to see where we want to proceed.
Just clarify.
But go ahead and A, B, and C. I'll go ahead and open up to the public for any comments on. That was the report on the plan of action, the grant one, Proposition 1 grant status, and the pump fee status and schedule. All right, hearing none, then I'll go ahead and open up the board on the well monitoring and TSS scope and budget. Does the board want to chime in on that and have any questions about it?
Just a question for the 5D item. Where is this well? What is it doing? I didn't see that with regard to, I saw that it was...
Yes. I think it's just one the first time. It's just they decided to go with one and then follow up with the second one. Heather, do you have more detail on the well? It's a good question. Gene in my office has been working with Tim Parker on the well. It's a monitoring well. I'm pretty sure the well is located. I'm trying to recall because we've got several monitoring wells.
It's in the El Paso subbasin in undisturbed land.
Yeah, and the idea
we were also informed that there may be 2 wells that will be approved with it, not just one.
Yeah, I think the ultimate application was going to be one at a time. First, an TSS application for one, then a follow-up with the second one. And I think I'm pretty sure Don's correct. It's in the El Paso area. This is the area where we're looking at potential replenishment, replenishment activities and storage and recovery. So this is an area where we need to get more hydrogeologic information for a program like that would be used, not only for but a replenishment program, but help to monitor a replenishment program, possibly a pilot program for a project later on, and to improve the conservation of local water that we have in that area.
So if I can summarize what I understand you just to say, this is to help us understand the possibility of intra-basin water replenishment and moving water within the basin to see how it might work from one side of the valley to another?
Generally, yes. Whether it's whether it's underground or on the surface.
Sure.
A replenishment program for that area might result in extraction and moving the water on the surface if it doesn't move underground of the water. So you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Don, I see you got your finger on the button. Did you have anything to comment on? Okay. And I want to make this clear: these aren't production wells; these are monitoring wells.
No, monitoring wells.
Right. Anything else from the board or the staff?
Would this be covered under Stetson's existing contract?
Yeah,
not the budget, obviously. But
yeah, definitely under the contract. Sure. Okay. Yes.
All done? Yeah. Okay. Hearing no more from the board, I'll open it up to the public. Does the public have any comments on this item, well monitoring?
Bless you.
Hi, guys. It's just as time-consuming sitting out there as it is up there. Peter Brown. I'm glad to see I have a timer, but I can't read the numbers. I got to go to work, so I just wanted to cover a couple of things real quick. This is about well monitoring. So, I don't know, back in November, October, I asked some questions as a board member about all this stuff, the monitoring and the costs. And I had provided a notated budget that had $800,000 on it of questions. And I brought those to the TAC because I wanted an independent comment on it. Because as a board director, now a well owner too, I wanted to know an outside person to say, is this good or bad? Or confirm my assumptions. Have we already done these? Sorry, my posture monitor is telling me I'm slouching. I got to turn it off. Anyways, so my whole intent was not to cast aspersions or something, but it was because I've been in this for 25 years or more, actually. And I'm a private well owner, and as a board director, and all these other things, and I'm licensed in all these water things. Have these things been done already, and do we not know about them, or had the things we've been done not sufficient, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So I provided this notated budget, and then I was at the meeting, and they started, your nice guy that was there, I can't remember his name, started to tackle each one of those one by one. And I said, this isn't necessary because your meeting will go on for another 2 hours. And I really wanted just to comment back, but I wanted it from the TAC because my intent was an independent outside look. And this is all engineering, way beyond me, technical stuff. So who do I ask? The TAC is my go-to people because they were our go-to people as we had all these committees. You know, and what the you know, the groundwater sustainable, or whatever it is. Where do we have the one where we all played together for like 25 years? What was that called? Cooperative, yeah. I never can remember that. So anyways, that was highly functional and very effective. It was free too. But I've gained incredible confidence in the TAC because of well, first off, because of they represent all major pumpers. And so I like that, independent. But I didn't get any response back, and that kind of bothers me a little bit. I was expecting Adam to make a summary report, but all I found in here was...
Excuse me, is this related to well monitoring?
Yeah,
I'm getting to that.
I'm getting a little leeway here because of your vast experience in time.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But this isn't related to the well monitoring, the DWR-funded project for some wells for monitoring that I can see. It's more of a general comment.
Well, I was going to the monitoring, but I'll wait until you talk about that in some other time.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, anything else from the public on the well monitoring? Hearing none, it's back to the board, and I guess, Jim, I'm sorry, David, do you have anything? No? All right. I guess you're looking for a motion to approve this expenditure, so I'm looking for a motion to approve the, which item is it? Item D, well monitoring.
Moved.
Second. Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed. Thank you. We'll move on to item E, the Navy Coastal Projects Priority List, and this letter as well. Let's open up this to the board for discussion. This is the first I've had a good chance to read the letter, and you say that this was written by Scott?
Primarily by Scott, yes.
Scott, okay.
About 99% Scott.
And what you're looking for is approval for the board to proceed to finalize this letter and send it off to the Navy or to the powers to be on this with our recommendation list. Is that correct? Okay. So, please.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it. Glad to jump in here. Thank you to Mr. O'Neill and Mr. Janice. Thank you very much for supporting this. This is a critically important letter. We must pass this letter. It is money that's out there hanging, and if we don't demonstrate an aggressive posture in our ability to spend those dollars, we risk the chance of acquiring those dollars. I not only agree with the letter, I agree with the priority, and I want to talk about that for a real quick second because it's of value to us and it's of value to the Navy. And the Project 1, that is the number one priority of these dollars, is to develop a screen of wells that are going to help us better understand our recharge number. Our recharge number is probably one of the most critical elements of our GSP. And we need a capability that is not only going to challenge the numbers we're using today, but it's going to provide us a capability of challenging those numbers for the next 20 years. And so I'm hopeful that by passing this letter, acquiring these dollars, and having that Project 1 instituted is of value to the Navy because they're members of this valley. It's important to us because it's going to constantly challenge the validity and the veracity of the numbers that we're using as a foundational block of our GSP. So I highly encourage the board to join me in approving this letter, and I will make a motion, or do I wait after the public comments?
Let's go ahead and see if there's any more discussion from the board, and I'll open it to the public. Yes, Mr. Kersey.
The one challenge with this list is right now we have no guidance on how to implement these funds, and until we have that guidance, we have no way of discussing or even working on this list. Once we have that guidance, we'll gladly let you know, and then we can start moving forward from there.
Okay.
Please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I understand exactly what you're talking about. And what we need to do is position ourselves to favorably engage in those conversations and convince and persuade the powers that be that their best interest of spending those dollars is through us in order to satisfy the legislative language that we're trying to comply with. So I understand that's not for us to worry about. That's for other people to worry about, and we have the talent to win that argument. I'm very confident. So thank you.
I got two questions. One, I don't see how the letter can do any harm. It may stop somewhere until those type of decisions are made and how you're going to proceed. But I want to believe that it won't do any harm. But it'll bookmark something. Someone say, hey, they're looking. They're talking. And secondly, I want to make sure to the water manager, I assume that we have your concurrence along with the TAC and the PAC that this is the list.
Yes, correct.
It's already run by them. Okay. That's my last comment.
Yes, and we are not stopping any of the projects we're doing because we're expecting this to go through. We're moving through. So there may be ultimately some level of duplication when it all happens, but we'll work that all out. Right now, we're getting the projects that belong in this application into the Navy. Yes.
And I have no problem with the letter as long as I feel it'll do no harm. Okay. That's what I want to make sure, that we don't hurt our efforts, but we enhance them in some way, even though we may be going through it again when they decide how things are going to work with that particular funding. Yes, sir.
On
John.
Project 4, sorry.
Yes.
On Project 4, I see that's another. On Project 4, I see that it's another El Paso well installation.
Correct.
For a substantially greater dollar value than what we just approved in item 5D. Can you explain the difference between the two?
Okay. Item number 4 is the actual well. What you did in item D was just our support work. The reason why we're making the application under the TSS application is because all of that work under the TSS application will be done by the state.
Understood.
That's why I refer to it as a grant, because we're getting something free, but it's not money, it's services, and the services include the well drilling. So we don't believe there's direct duplication, but we are moving forward on both. We have potential for free services from the state under the TSS application, and we have the potential for income from the Navy to work in that same area.
And do we expect to send future requests for this funding for the remaining number of priority projects on the
Absolutely. You might remember when I first talked about this, I talked about some other higher priority projects in my mind, including imported water infrastructure, which I know we have to work on that, but also on impacts to shallow wells and mitigation. Absolutely, we'd follow up this with another application.
Understood.
Yes.
And the concept being that this is essentially a data gathering list of projects, and that will help inform our future decisions with other projects?
Correct. And in coordination with representatives, with David and Scott, representatives that are familiar with the process, the goal here was to try to get projects that would be most acceptable to the Navy, where they see a benefit for both the Navy and us going forward, and are tangible, real projects they can see something built and something done. That was the goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more from the board before I turn over to public? Okay, I'll turn over for public comment.
Good afternoon, Board. Don Decker. What I have to say here isn't a criticism of the letter, but it's an encouragement for the water manager and the TAC to fully coordinate these two project areas. One of the problems that exists is given to us by the really tight schedule that the project that we all are trying to succeed at. That schedule is so ambitious that a lot of the decision making, the coordination aspects, and the best product is just a little bit beyond reach at times. But when we have an opportunity to, for example, explore additionally in this valley, we really need to engage the TAC to the limits of the ability of that committee. That's what I have to say for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for the vote.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. All right. On to Number 6, approval of well intel proposal for Indian Wells Valley Basin monitoring.
So I'll do a short introduction here.
Okay.
Lee Knutson with Well Intel attended the November 1st TAC meeting and made a presentation at that meeting on the Well Intel well monitoring technology, the capability. He came to the November 15th board meeting and introduced himself. He's been to the December and January TAC meetings. He was to the December board meeting. At the January TAC meeting on the 3rd, he suggests a proposal by his company for a program, a project, if you will, to demonstrate their technology at no cost. The proposal is in your packet. He's here to give a brief overview of that proposal and then answer any questions from the board and public.
Thanks, Don. Is this on? Can everyone hear me okay? Good. All right. I'm Lee Knutson with Well Intel. And Well Intel invented a tool for monitoring water levels and pumping activity from domestic wells and small ag wells. And federal, state, local agencies from all over the nation have adopted our tools and technologies because they're easier to use, less expensive, and provide value to well owners as well as governing agencies. So I'm offering this tool to this groundwater authority because I think that it can really benefit your GSP and the basin, the well owners, groundwater stakeholders, everyone involved. In this proposal, there's a 60-day trial where I provide the equipment with no charge up front, the installation with no charge up front, and then the groundwater authority can choose to opt out within 60 days from the installation date. So you have a chance to assess the tools and the data that's generated from these technologies. I'm confident that you're not going to want to opt out because this is new and really great and valuable technology. So I hope to get the chance to work with you all in the coming years and help to achieve a sustainable basin. I'll take questions now if you have any.
Any questions for the board? John, maybe you do.
Just one. The optional, assuming the annual operation is approved, the optional well intel field services for $1,250 a day. Can you describe what that $1,250 a day rate includes?
If there's any maintenance that needs to be done, essentially there's two wear parts on these devices. One is the battery, if you want to go with the battery option, and the other is the microphones that hang about 6 inches into the well. And those need to be replaced once every 1 to 2 years. And it's really easy to do. So really there's no reason to charge us for that because you have technical staff here in the basin who can handle that. And in this installation, I'll be training up a technical staff on how to do those tasks and monitor for maintenance tasks.
Is there a more robust agreement, or is it simply this proposal for the 60-day trial that we're looking to approve or otherwise today?
That's all. Yeah, it's pretty simple, straightforward.
So again, it's how many wells for how long for free until we decide?
It's 10 wells.
Okay.
And you have 60 days to decide to return it.
Okay. And so I'm going to ask for our water manager, Steve Johnson, chime in on this. Where are we on it, and how did it get to where it is?
Well, there's a guy that used to be on the board named Peter Brown who actually installed these in as well. And I think he brought it to the TAC as a concept. It was a little hazy as to what the whole concept was, what we could do with it. Appropriately, the TAC had us and had Steve Reich, our data manager guy, had Steve Reich look at this. He worked with Well Intel on the evaluation and how it fits in or doesn't fit in with what we already have on the table. We're already doing on database collection and monitoring wells and what we're doing for the basin. And the conclusion was that they're not the same thing. Okay, what we're looking at here is more of a rural monitoring program. It's a very valuable program, and it's provide a lot of good information. And I will say, from our perspective, it definitely fits in with what we're doing. It's over and above what we've already set up and got in place for the basin, for monitoring going forward, for basin management. But this is additional data. I mean, as engineers and hydrogeologists, we always want more information. This is more information. I think, as was pointed out by WellIntel and Peter Brown, even at the TAC, there's also potential down the road because this also monitors production. There's also potential. We're only doing 10 wells now, but depending on the ability to have a facility like these types of this type of equipment in the basin, there's a potential of reducing cost of monitoring also. Of production and paying bills and stuff. That information goes right out on the cloud. You just get it. You don't have to do all the processing. So down the road, there's a possibility for that too. From our perspective, it's good information. It's going to provide valuable information. The technology is good. It does not replace what we've already put in place, but augments it. As we said, augmentation. It augments it with more local, more rural information, as was pointed out. Domestic wells, small ag, those type of installations, not necessarily for the bigger monitoring wells, the multi-port monitoring wells we're using, or the large ag or the large municipal wells that were already included in the program. So we would support it if the board would like to have this type of information available. We're certainly not opposed to it.
Don?
Yeah, one positive thing with this technology, as I understand it, is it's real-time data. So if a high-producing well were started and you had a network around that well, you could actually see real-time the impact of pumping from that well on the surrounding wells. In this case, perhaps the shallow domestic wells. Also, benefit to the Water Resource Manager, the Groundwater Authority. There's benefits to the well owner as well, and that they can monitor in real time the conditions of their well and potentially see problems ahead of time that they may be experiencing with their well and head off some costs that they may incur later on. So there's benefits to the Groundwater Authority, benefits to the individual well owners. And I think the offer here to do this at no cost for 60 days just to demonstrate the technology is something that I would suggest the board consider. If after 60 days there's decision is, we don't like it, they pack up and they leave and there's no cost at all to the Groundwater Authority. So I think the offer is quite appealing.
I think they have people in line to do it. Some well owners are in line to do it.
Yeah, I believe you've got some well owners already aligned to participate.
Yeah.
Should the board decide to go forward?
Yeah, I have about a dozen well owners who are interested, and I'd like to increase that number so we get a good spread across the basin. Yeah, and I'll work with you to decide on which monitoring points make the most sense.
So what's the long game here? I mean, does the potential exist? You're saying that in 60 days we're going to see something we like, or are we just testing with, in other words, what's the long game? And,
I believe to demonstrate the capability of the network and particularly to private well owners, that they can see the benefit of it, and ultimately, if they can see the benefit of it and win over more domestic well owners, ideally, if you had this technology at every well in the basin, I mean that would be your ideal. I don't know that we can achieve that, but again, benefit to the private well owner. We can do all the modeling we want, but if you have real-time data, that would, when you start a well up and you can see the impact around that well, that's huge in my mind.
Does the TAC concur with this recommendation?
Yes, the TAC does. We did make those comments, and also from all around the benefits of this information, but also we fully understood what Steve had just mentioned about the needs for the GSP level. And he also reiterated, this is good information that WellIntel can give. We have what we need to meet the GSP needs, but this is additional information that can be used that will help us understand how well is the model going and being used. And then the modeling group themselves, DRI, has said any information that they can get that can help with their model, they are glad to receive that and use that as needed because it helps update the model in essence.
Is there any hope of getting more of the individual well owners on board with the understanding that this can actually benefit them in monitoring their well? As I understand it, you're able to look at the performance and tell whether a well might be cycling, if there may be some other problems going on, and catch it before it results in major maintenance. If that's the case, that's a good selling point for the individual well owners, and hopefully that we can get some buy-in. I don't think it's going to be easy. I'm looking at Dave on this one because I know he's working on it. And that's my question, is this going to be beneficial in maybe getting some people to help us gather the data we need?
The PAC did not receive the specific lengthy proposal that you talked about the way the TAC did. Those of us that attended both the PAC and the TAC, and Lee came and talked to us that evening and mentioned it overall, and it was in light of, this goes back to my comment about things that we should now and are now working in parallel. We were working on the reach out to the shallow well owners, the de minimis pumpers, and you asked, this board asked us to comment on that. I'll cover that in my PAC minute or PAC statement. This is viewed as one of the things we're recommending is we need to put in any communications to them why it's beneficial, why this data actually is going to help them downstream from information standpoint, perhaps financially, et cetera. So incentives, benefits, et cetera, the PAC agreed that, and I'm summarizing the comments of the PAC before we commissioned the ad hoc group, which is going to give specific comment on this. However, in general, that was the focus of the outreach program, and this may be, as was pointed out, an exact component of it and related to it.
Okay, thank you. I guess the other question would be, let's just say after the 60 days you decide, hey, this is great. This is something we want to proceed with. I'd certainly like to see a dollar amount on them, yearly cost, where it's going to go, and,
Sure.
Is that what this short little brief is?
Yeah.
For those 10 wells.
For those 10 wells. So what we're looking at is if we agree to continue with those particular 10 wells, as I understand this, $11,880 would be the installation and
that's right. Charge. That's all the charges for the first year.
$310 a year to, I'm sorry, $3,010 a year. But that included that $1,250 a day, correct? Did it not?
That is the upper limit of what you need to budget for this network annually.
Because the sounders can be changed by us,
sounders and
batteries, such like that.
And then the annual charge for all the online data services and dashboards. There's all sorts of visualization tools that you'll receive with this network.
What are communication restrictions?
So
in terms of
our radio receivers plug into internet routers, and that communicates with the sensor on the well wirelessly up to a half-mile away.
Okay. All right. I don't have any more questions. Does the board have any more questions?
So there's no cost to the well owner.
No.
And in the future use of the equipment, or if it goes on long standing, that's still just a volunteer well for source of data.
They only receive benefits.
Right.
So this is a close community here, and when people start to see the value that the Groundwater Authority is providing them with this type of program, I think word's going to get out, and people are going to build a little faith in you guys and get on board.
Is there any way to elaborate on the incentive aspect of that for these well owners that may to incentivize them to possibly be willing to volunteer their well?
Yeah, and in fact,
what are some of the benefits or perks that they may get to?
How many of the 10? How many are individual well owners? Do we know?
Oh, they all would be.
They all are?
Yes.
So you've got 10 volunteers who are willing to work with this. Pretty good. I'd ask you how you got that done, but that's,
I've been working here for months.
And you've been working it for months, okay.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and you've got the 10 already.
Yeah, I do. I don't have them laid out on a map. I'd like to put on a small community meeting and get the word out through a couple different means and minds.
So if you have the 10 already, as far as the type of wells that they are, old wells, shallow wells, where they're located in the valley?
They'll all be shallower wells.
So all shallower wells?
Yes.
And then are you going to get back to us as far as like where these are located and what, as far as the data, what kind of data would they show and where they located and how is that going to parlay in the future to good data on the direct effects of whatever it is we're looking at, the output, recharge, but
I'll be back at the next TAC and PAC meeting to meet with the board members there and representatives of the water district to overview the volunteers that we have.
At the TAC and PAC?
Yes.
Okay. Because I think that's important as far as where these wells located in the valley and what kind of effects that they're going to.
And like
so even you have 10, maybe we need to get a couple over on this side of the valley or further up.
Isolate recharge zones, heavy pumping areas, things like that.
Okay. Very good.
Good.
Is there a way to coordinate the timing of when the wells are installed? I know we have a 60-day window, and obviously there'd be, I think, an interest in seeing the report back before this board was interested in deciding to do a long-term agreement or otherwise. So just wanting to think ahead about the timing of that process to give enough time for the decision makers to make a decision on a long-term agreement.
Yeah, if I understood the question, the clock starts after the installation is complete of the 10 wells?
That's correct.
For 60 days?
Right. So
you're asking about timing to report back to the board?
Right.
Okay.
So my question was, can we put some thought into, maybe having a mutually agreeable installation date that coincides with reporting back to this board to give an informed decision-making process to go long-term or otherwise?
Yes, of course. I'll bring back the data that we've collected over those 2 months to you in a few slides and show you what you've generated. And then you can decide.
So I believe this will be in the water manager's hands and tax hands, and then at some point you'll come back to us where, and Don as well, what the results are and what your recommendations are, whether to proceed or not. Is that correct? Correct. Okay. Any other thing for the board before I turn it over to the public? All right, any public comment?
Don Decker again. I'm the chairman of the Domestic Well Association here in the Indian Wells Valley, as you all know. And we have talked with many of our associate members whether they were in fact interested in participating in this program. And some that we have talked with, I will say, expressed mild interest. One of the things that when they discover in reading the well intel literature that the device that we're talking about is effectively a smart meter on their well, and it essentially gives the cloud and whoever has the authority of reading their records, gives them an instantaneous view of when the well goes on and when it goes off, which means that people know when they're home and that sort of thing, and they basically absolutely blow their fuses out when they discover that. I think Steve expressed it correctly. It goes beyond what the requirement is for monitoring. Many of the private well owners are indeed interested in, for example, their production, but there are much less expensive ways to do that actually gives them the satisfaction of maintaining their own database. So my comment here is that although the well intel instrument it's a modern wonder, it is really a smart meter, and the implication of that is not lost on the shallow well community, I can assure you. And the other comment I've got is, to my best recollection, the TAC recommendation was to have Stetson engineers review the proposal and to make a recommendation, and that the TAC itself at that time did not either approve or disapprove of this proposal. And I'm contradicting Adam's comment earlier. I realize that fully.
Thank you, Don.
Renee Westelusk. My question has to do with the timing of the well monitoring. Are you going to wait a few months to where we get to high pumping time where there's a lot more water being pumped so we could actually see results, like you said, on surrounding shallow wells that would be affected by other wells that are pumping a lot of water? Because I don't see the advantage right now of installing the monitoring system on the individual wells, because I don't think you're going to see much change unless you're looking for an increase in their well level, because that happens during the winter when there's not as much pumping. I want to know when you would install for the 60 days.
Well, to my knowledge, we haven't discussed the specific time, but you raised a valid point. I think the information would be more valuable if it were in a period where people are pumping more. So that's a valid point.
Yeah. I'd like to see that presented to the board as an option. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
Judy Decker, I have a concern. My concern is several of the things that you have talked about this morning, TSS, Well and Tell, the letter to the Navy, I feel there's side issues that are detracting from the main purpose of getting the plan done, and you as a board who only meet once a month discussing the individual items of the plan and going forward with it. And I wanted to let you know that I felt that way because you don't, but Stetson Engineers has a terrible deadline. January 2020 is coming right along, and there's nothing we can do to stop time. So remember that that's the main purpose here.
Thank you, Judy. Any other comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring, you're just there for questions?
Yeah, I would just like to respond just
Okay.
briefly. As far as the domestic well owners, that is the first response that domestic well owners have. It's fear and uncertainty. But that's why I said that this is a close community, and if I work with people, they'll build trust in me and you, and that's really the goal, to win people over to work together to reach a sustainable basin. And Renee, to your question, ideally this network stays for years and years, so you're always monitoring water levels on these wells. I wouldn't bring this forward if I was just offering it for 60 days and planning on taking it back. I intend that you guys keep this network because it's a valuable technology that has never been available before. So that's all.
Yes, go ahead, Mick.
Is there any way you can filter the information that's collected?
That's right, yeah. So if people are worried about the pumping activity.
And the privacy concerns.
Yes. There's aggregated ways to view the data, and there's also ways to configure the sensors so you're not monitoring pumping activity. It just tells you if that pump was on or off at a specific interval when it takes readings. So when we were developing this technology, we were in Paso Robles, and there are incredible privacy concerns there. So we designed the system with domestic well owners in mind and their security of their information. Now, to make well monitoring valuable, you have to use it in a network form. Otherwise, it's just people looking at their own resource and you don't get the big picture. So we try to find a compromise there. And I put a lot of effort into finding that balance.
Thank you. Peter?
I'll try to be briefer.
Set his timer at 2 minutes and a half.
Go ahead. I got a bonus question. No, anyways, wow, I didn't know I was that loud. Anyways, this was what I was getting to was saving money. I look at everything, if you can save money and get an equal or better product, that's where I go. And so I spent, I don't know, $1,700 to put 2 of these at my place, and then I gave everybody access to my data so you could see what was going on. The point is, I don't know what everybody's talking about, privacy and stuff. You guys need to know cause and effect of pumping. You guys need to know if a major ag well or water district well clicks on, what's the exact effect of those people around them in real time? And this was the entire intention of this, of where I'm headed. Now, data loggers are data loggers, whatever. I don't really care what tech you use. I care what it costs and how much better it can be. It's up to the engineers and the knowledgeable people. I'm looking at it from a perspective of overall. The Department of Water Resources already stated that water level can be used as a means to decide whether your program is effective or not. Just water level, just water elevations. So when they said that, I go, bang, that could be our central point. But more so, people say, well, this guy turns on his well and mine drops 20 feet. Well, does it really drop 20 feet? And does it really drop 20 feet when he turns on his well? This is actual real data and real cause and effect, and it's temporal. So you can look at relationships and you can look at transmissivity and conductivity and all the things your models are predicting, this would give you the real data to go back and forth. So if you just made them data points and without a name, that doesn't really matter. What you're looking for is real data. So that was my intention. It was a low-cost way to turn any well into a monitoring well. And it doesn't matter if it's active or not, because you're going to know whether it's active or not when it's taking a measurement. So that kind of did away with, like when the county comes and they do their taping, well, when were those wells last running? Now, averages over years, it doesn't matter. But when you're looking at cause and effect in real time, that does matter. So you don't need to drill a monitoring well to use a well as a monitoring well. You have a device that says this hasn't run for X amount of time, and here's my static water level that's been this way forever. Here's my known static water level, and here's my pump depression. So it measures that, but it's not limited. It's not limited by any well. It fits all wells. Major producer wells have a different pumping system. You might have to have a tube, but it's not just for domestic wells. It's for all wells. And my intention was to put them on every well in the valley, and then you have an automated sensor net where you know what's happening, cause and effect. Absolutely, because it's here and it's here, and they have a modeling program that shows you that. So hopefully you guys will go with the free. There's no cost. Give it a try.
Thank you, Peter.
On that note, Mr. Chair, how confident are we with regard to the 60-day trial and the siting of the specific wells that we're intending to do the test run on with regard to, usable data with regard, this pumper over here is a major pumper, and we're seeing how that affects on domestic wells that are shallow or other valuable insights that we don't currently have access to?
I can't speak to that. I don't know if you've seen a map. I have not seen a map of the locations.
Was this part of the discussion with the technical advisory committee?
Not specific.
No, it wasn't.
Not specific locations.
Because I think the concept, in terms of where I'm leaning at this point, the concept is great. But in terms of getting something valuable back within the 60 days to make a long-term decision, the siting of these particular devices would obviously be important and crucial to that data quality.
Yes, that needs to be discussed at the next TAC meeting or in a private meeting for sure. I've had verbal commitments, but it needs to be laid out on a map, and we need more possible monitoring points to isolate the areas of the basin that we want to monitor.
So it seems like we would need to delegate some authority to approve the siting locations, assuming we go forward with the 60-day trial.
Sure.
That's assuming he can get more than 10
right.
well owners. We may be limited by the people that are willing to try the system out.
Right.
But as I see it, we're proving the technology more than anything else at this point. And if it's something that I believe that you believe works, is advantageous to us, then we can begin to look at distribution such of it. Okay. Any other? Oh, someone behind you there.
West Katzenstein, domestic well owner. It just occurred to me that one of the critical parts of the GSP is going to be critical minimum thresholds. If those are ever hit, then your plan should presumably change and be revised to do away with those minimum critical thresholds. And in my mind, I think the threat to the shallow wells is probably going to be the main critical threshold for this basin. And that, if you protect those wells, you're protecting the basin, in my mind. And so this system might be your critical threshold system. You might set it up around the valley so it alerts you that you're hitting those critical thresholds or not. That might require that the wells you choose, you may need to know a little bit more about those specific wells, how deep they are, their age, where the screen is, and things like that. But one possible advantage of this may be it could become your critical threshold system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the public? Hearing none, bring it back to the board. Any final discussion on this before we move ahead? All right. I'm going to entertain a motion.
Motion on staff's recommendation.
Just to make sure I understand staff's recommendation, that is just to a blanket approval of the 60-day trial with no further decision-making in between?
I think at this time, maybe what staff would be looking for is authorization for the general manager to sign the proposal and further authorization for the water resource manager and staff to work with Well and Tell to develop the details to implement and go ahead and to implement the pilot project for the 60 days. And we'd come back to the board at the end of the 60 days, or very close there, to looking for further recommendation authorization.
Would that include any modification of the sites of the monitoring?
Yes, I think
You know,
that'd
like
be part of
if-
working out the details through the TAC and the water resource manager, where the best locations for the wells would be. I consider that all part of the details.
Yeah, 10 sites to be determined by the water manager, and what's available. Yeah, exactly.
Is that the scope of the current motion?
Yeah, what he said, right?
I will second that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, hearing nothing, I'll call for a vote. We've closed public session at this time, so I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you. All right. Is another agenda item, or?
It's on this item. I realize I'm out of order, but I wonder if this board realizes that Sigma specifically excludes the domestic de minimis wells from metering and reporting. So these wells that will be equipped will be voluntary.
That's correct. All right, we'll move on to item 7, approval of general liability insurance coverage for Indian Wells Valley Groundwater Authority.
Okay, I'll cover that. There's a staff report in your packet. I'll just go over it briefly. November 15th, at the Groundwater Authority Board meeting, they approved purchasing general liability and other related insurance to cover the organization in case of loss. Staff made contact with public agency pools and insurance brokers to gain quotes for insurance coverages. 2 qualified insurers offered quotes, and the board approved the quote offered by the Joint Powers Risk and Insurance Management Authority, J-PRIMA. The J-PRIMA quote approved by the board of $8,654 annually is for all coverages. J-PRIMA coverage is unique in that it is pooled coverage. J-PRIMA is an association that offers to join together or pool its members in a self-insurance and insurance purchasing group. Public agencies join J-PRIMA and share or pool their risk along with other members. Members make deposits to the pool, which are just like insurance premiums, and pay claims from those deposits using an insurance pool administrator that has experience in evaluation, paying, and settling claims. The board recommendation, the staff recommendation, is that IWV GA board approve the agreement to become a party to the amended Joint Powers Agreement creating the California Association of Mutual Water Companies Joint Powers Risk and Insurance Management Authority, and authorize the chair to sign the agreement. And just one thing to add, if we do sign on with them, we are not locked into any specific coverage. We can select, the board can select whatever coverages they deem are applicable and are needed for the board.
Okay,
so
thank
what
you.
you see on the quote are just some examples and the cost. So that is at your discretion. All we're asking for is approval to sign the Joint Powers Agreement.
Okay. So with the list you have under J-PRIMA, I mean, we could pick and choose those, what you're saying. The total package is $8,654.
Yes, by approving, signing on to the Joint Powers Agreement today, you are not locking into those coverages. It's up to the board what coverages they desire.
I'll always defer to legal on that coverage requirements.
Actually, I think the board's already authorized getting this insurance. It's just that we need to enter this agreement before they'll actually cover us.
That's correct. I remember in a meeting when it was first presented by Alan that the board authorized at that time. So to the board, any questions about it? We just move on. I'll open it to the public. I'm not sure they'll have any on our insurance, but if you got any insights, I'm more than happy to hear.
Wes Katzenstein, member of the PAC. Just wanted to make one passing comment. When we were working on the outreach to domestic wells that I guess Dave will be reporting on now or maybe next month, I'm not sure, but it occurred to us that we don't have any of this coverage in the PAC or the TAC. And I don't see any problem with that. Just we may choose to shy away from making some decisions that's more appropriate for you folks to make. So.
Jim, is that something we can clarify? I would think that under the auspices of a committee of the board that they're covered. Is that correct? Maybe you can't answer that at this time.
I would have to look at the coverage. What coverage? I don't recall.
Okay.
I don't recall exactly what coverage was selected 2 months ago. And depending upon the coverage and the terms, then I could give you a better determination of whether the PAC would be covered under any specific scenario.
I see Mr. Janis has a...
Can I ask for a further clarification on that? Since our charter is not specifically not to make decisions, but to only make recommendations.
Good point.
Is there liability in just making recommendations to follow up on West Point?
Yeah.
And if there is, then the consideration becomes valuable to us. If there is no risk in terms of recommendation only, then we don't bear any liability potentially, correct?
I don't think PAC members have liability for making recommendations to the Groundwater Authority Board. The board is the ultimate authority that determines whether or not to implement something. So I think the liability ultimately will rest with the Groundwater Authority.
And I'm sure Adam has the same concern with the TAC, but I would assume it's relevant.
Thank you. Hearing no more from the public, I'll bring it back to the board. I guess I'm looking to entertain a motion to approve the agreement to become a party to the amended joint powers agreement creating the California Association of Mutual Water Companies Joint Powers Risk and Insurance Management Authority. Does that cover it all, or did you have?
I think that covers it all.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you. Oh, you were giving someone else a chance. Yeah. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None opposed? Motion passes. So let's see where we are. All right, we're on a report from the Technical Advisory Committee. Now, you get 1 minute for every hour you spend in the committee. Okay?
We'll make it. Thank you, Chairman. I do have 2 reports for the Technical Advisory Committee meetings, both in January and December. If you would like to also hear the December report, I will state that a lot of the items in a very large December report was condensed because more discussions did take place in the January meeting, but I'll leave that up to you if you'd like to hear more of that information. But I will move forward with the January's report. The call to order was done on January 3rd. Only 2 members were not present, Michelle Anderson and Wade Major, and at this time we still do not have a Rand Community Water District representative. We were open for public comments. Lee Knudsen with L&Tel did state the gift to test water level elevation for free. Here are the items that were discussed. This is a bunch of these things kind of put together to save time. The draft GSP sections for from WRM Stetson were presented. The Prop 1 grant status with the Department of Water Resources was discussed. A DWR meeting with Stetson occurred, which included discussions on imported water and alternative water projects. Of course, you've already heard a lot of this information. The RFP is coming for those projects, and the board meeting presentation will be coming forth this January, as it did. For GSP modeling, the baseline model status presented, including the DRAI presentation regarding the 2020 to 2070 provisions, were provided, and model results given, including drawdown within analysis and budget. Modeling scenarios and GSP sections also discussed. Production flows updated with the DRI on the phone. Modeling scenarios, of course, were continued discussed with them. For shallow well impacts, 31 domestics have been accounted for, and more impact well data and information regarding screen depths are needed. Comments on depths, previous drilling, lost wells information, and importantly, shallow well consolidation. Mitigation factors impact, shallow well benefits, drawdown differences, including various impacts, were all discussed. For data gap status and monitoring network, current monitoring plans and the TSS grants, I will say, status update regarding the ad hoc review for wells and aquifer testing was discussed. Excuse me. Future ad hoc meetings are being set up. The TSS proposal for DWR approval must be submitted, and it has been that we've been informed. SkyTem data can also assist with the evaluation. For introduction of chapter review, Jeff Helsley mentioned the official draft GA Board Groundwater Sustainability Plan that is coming, and the Chapter 1 was sent out for comments. With the alternative water study, Ron Kaczynski, a member of the Indian Wells Valley Water District, did give a public comment regarding a water district meeting discussion idea regarding recharge and capture from eastern mountains. The WRM is aware of this. The Navy Coastal Royalty, the funding potentials were discussed, as the discussion did happen here in this meeting. The project lists were reviewed. All available funds must be applied for and used within a short time, or they will become lost. The GA Board meeting submittal, of course, will occur. And that was our recommendation as well. There were no additional WRM or TAC member announcements and comments made further at that time, and the meeting was adjourned at 4:31 p.m.
Thank you. I don't see any reason to go into December because everything sort of carries over. I mean, it's usually a carryover discussion. Unless the board wants to hear the December report, I suggest that we move on for any questions that we may have for...
I do have one question.
Yes.
Was that fast enough?
In fact, you banked a couple minutes for next week. No, I'm just kidding. Next month. When's your next meeting?
Our next meeting is scheduled for February 7th.
7th, okay. Are there any questions for Adam?
Can I hear a little bit? So can I hear a little bit more about the discussions that you had with regard to imported water and alternative project ideas to tackle?
For the imported water and alternative ideas, one moment here. I'm shifting back to some of the December stuff. There was some large discussions on imported water.
When I help out, Adam?
Yes, do help me out, because there's a whole bunch of items that...
This ties back, it's a good question. This ties back to, I think, what I mentioned earlier about, and ties back to Director Gleason's comments about augmentation planning. We have given PowerPoints, and if you go, I don't have them with me. No, I don't have them with me, because all the times I carry this stuff. Several PowerPoint presentations on, and the title is Alternative Water, Alternative/Imported Water Opportunities and Constraints. That's what we're looking at right now. And I mentioned there's a tech memo that's been prepared. But these PowerPoints have been covering all of the different aspects of alternative water that we're looking at and have been run through the TAC, which include the recycled water opportunities, tertiary plant that the city's working on, where that water might be used, how that might augment our water supply, reduce pumping demands, the different sources of imported water. We've gone through all of the different sources of imported water that we might find, both from water rights standpoint, where we can find the water supplies, and also physical facilities between LA Aqueduct, AVEC, treated water lines. All of that has been discussed and presented in the, and a bit on conservation too, but all of that has been presented in these PowerPoints that are really the meat of the technical memorandum that, as a pointer, hasn't been released yet. So probably the best thing to do, and this is going to tie to our augmentation plan, the committee that we're putting together, and maybe summarize it, we'll bring it back to the board. But in the meantime, if you went online and looked at the latest, or went back a couple of PowerPoint presentations,
I've seen those links.
Yeah, they're all, it's in there, and just walk through, because each one of them kind of picks up where the last meeting left off, and then what we went forward on to refine some of the information. Included our water supply amounts, sources from different locations, cost of water supply from past acquisitions that we know about. You had some good representation here on who might go out and find some water supplies, but we provided, from our experience, past acquisitions and transfers of water, and also we've estimated physical water facility costs to get the water into our basin, both treated water and raw water. Combine those into a total for a project cost, a cost per acre foot that you might be looking at for potentially 15,000 acre feet. What is the cost per acre foot on a long-term project, like a 30-year project, which includes capital, O&M, interest pay, the whole payments for a bond, or however you financed it. It's all in there in the PowerPoint presentation, and it has now been put into a technical memorandum, which you will be getting in the next couple of weeks. Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the board to Adam?
Thank you for that, Steve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything from the public? Any questions for the TAC? All right, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move on. Mr. Janis, you're on.
We did have a couple things happen at the December meeting, 4 to be exact, that I want to call to your attention. The full, complete reports that were provided to the board and staff are also available to the public in the packet that was sent out with this meeting, so it's available there. On the December 6th meeting, the first item I wanted to talk about, we had on the agenda requested that Mr. Markman come and talk to us with regards to alternative pumping allocation scenarios and guidance on a successful process forward, how some of those had worked. That item and that was the primary objective of this meeting. That item got postponed based on the fact that Mr. Markman had subsequently been able to organize a meeting with the major pumpers' attorneys on December 7th, which was to be the following day. So we postponed it out of this meeting, but by way of explanation, what was provided was that his main objective is to work together with the attorneys and to define their objectives and alternatives to develop an equitable and fair plan with the intent to preclude litigation among all stakeholders, such that the perception of the stakeholders, all, not just the attorneys at the meeting, was in fact fair and avoid any litigation. One of our PAC members did note that all pumper groups do not have, in their belief, direct attorney representation in those sessions. That was actually covered in January. We will talk about that. The PAC reiterated our request, had we had a meeting in January, that we again wanted Mr. Markman to be present physically to deliver that because of his expertise, demeanor, experience, and the value in that, and that the meeting again be devoted solely to that topic, given its criticality and high public interest. Second item, the resignation of Chair Donna Thomas from the Resource Conservation District necessitated that resignation in this position as well, and we elected a chair. I chaired this meeting as the vice chair, and in reward I was elected new chair.
You must have stepped out for a moment.
Yeah, I stepped. Well, that's how I got the vice chair. It was the only meeting I missed in 14 months. Pat Quist was elected the vice chair, replacing me, and we went forward. We took on board the tasked item from the board you'd given us last time, which was to talk about de minimis pumper outreach and a desire to get voluntary registration, or at least the data that we need to help focus the plan. And so that topic was assigned. Given the holidays, it was not assigned to be complete out of the next meeting. However, they came close to that. One of the points we wanted to make was that we were previously tasked, back when that was a part of the original complete fee plan, on how to approach de minimis pumpers in the July meeting, and that was available and referenced by the group that ended up performing this function. Key to note is that one of the sustainability criteria that has been developed in the TAC, potentially, which is key to the whole plan, as was noted earlier in public comment, was the impact on shallow wells. And in fact, therefore, there could be benefits to voluntary registration in determining the criteria. So that was incorporated in it. The third action, well, the action out of this was we appointed an ad hoc committee to report back on it. Last comment I would make was during member comments, a question was raised regarding a potential need for future meeting policy refresher or clarification for new members and individual PAC members about what public speaking in a public forum, when you can identify yourself in making your comments as a PAC member and when you could not, when you had to identify yourself as an individual member. And that could be verbally or in writing, both of which have occurred in the past. The recommendation was, out of this and the subsequent meeting, I'll lead ahead right into January, was that a simple written clarification of when you can and cannot identify yourself as a PAC member when you speak publicly or write publicly would be helpful to the PAC members. Going on to the any questions on the December meeting minutes?
Oh, I thought that was both meetings.
No,
no.
I led into it because some of it
I understand.
went there.
No.
Okay. The January meeting, January 3rd, we did get Mr. Markman to come, and also Mr. Johnson, the water resource manager, came, and the topic again was pumping allocation update and future process guidance. Mr. Markman provided it extensively to the group, and the objective again was, as I stated earlier, he began that meeting with the attorneys that was in fact held on December 7th with an agreed baseline to establish a starting point of the parties and the key parties involved, and included a discussion of carryover rights, staggered ramp downs, separate management area plans within the basin, pumping rights, transferability, soft landing, safety and health considerations, and the fact that it's a 5-year phased plan that we're talking about. We need to have a complete plan, but it's going to have phased reviews and adjustments to the actions. So that was a very valuable session. We also had a clarification of the approximate litigation costs should we devolve, as many basins have, into litigation, because there had been some misinformation out there about that. He clarified that the rule of thumb he uses, based on his experience, is $250K per year for anyone involved in the litigation, which essentially is each of the groups that end up represented under the Valley. But for the primary litigants, it's $1 million a year in terms of what we're trying to avoid and solve this. And you compound that by the fact that it can take years and more. The more typical example is decades of litigation to then get to render a solution that we pay fees anyway for. So that was an important outcome. Public comment on this whole discussion related on clear cost analysis and visibility of the public, transparency, and what it means to an individual. For example, what does the when we adopt the plan and the outcome of a negotiation, which would be recommended to this board to make a final decision on moving forward to put into the plan, what does that mean for a ratepayer? What is the impact on their fees? What are they expecting to see? The same with large pumpers, et cetera. What does it fiscally mean to you? And this goes back to our public outreach task. The second half, before I say what the action and path forward was, the second half was on PAC future process and guidance. And one item came up for awareness and that we highlighted needed a direct public addressing. It was noted during the discussion that under SGMA, once SGMA was established, a property that did not already have a well or the ability to connect to external service would likely not have water rights to drill. And that was where that comment was left in relation to a question that related to real estate agents' representation of a property that might be up for sale that didn't have a well already, nor be available for hookup service. So the outcome of that meeting is it was his opinion, Mr. Markman's opinion, that was likely the case, but it's going to need clarification. Does that apply to de minimis use, for example? Or is this only major pumper use? And the fact that this, in fact, was a basic function established when SGMA came into place and essentially established the maximum period for proscribed rights, which is what this gets into in the legal terminology. and that would be the day that Sigma was implemented. So that's something that needs more outreach, more clarification, and public outreach in the recommendation from the PAC. What Mr. Markman proposed specifically for the future process, and it relates to his attorneys' meetings as well as how the PAC proceeded forward, was he proposed that he will update or provide an update as required his negotiation status at the next meeting and recommend any concepts and issues for the PAC to review out of that meeting, and he anticipated that there would be such. The intent was that this review that he brings to us and tasking of something out of that review that he brings to us will productively support his negotiation process and public awareness as a part of that, and be coordinated by Mr. Markman and the Water Resource Manager under the authority and direction of the GA itself. And that this process continue. As a part of that, the comments that the board made, or that the committee made with regards to his presentation, we were offered the opportunity for additional written comments that we will come and discuss at the next PAC, and he will bring in the new summary in any tasking and we'll consolidate the comments and then start on the new process. So there's an iterative process that's proposed here that would get into our future agenda. The draft GSP came up for review, Section 1, and it also was put into a process, so we had individual comment. Those will all be collated and addressed at the next PAC meeting when we expect perhaps draft of chapter number 2, and they will proceed in an iterative draft process. The chapters are now available on the GA website, so the public has them. The public can weigh in with their comments at the PAC also, as well as submit directly if needed, and we'll take those into account. On the policy outreach on imported water, and Steve referred to this earlier, either he or I, or in concert with each other, I misstated the fact that the technical memorandum regarding imported water was complete and posted. It is not, as Steve said. What was complete was the package of PowerPoint presentations that essentially summarize and contain all the same information, and those are available. But the actual report itself is not final, will be soon, as he said. The future agenda items I have to review with you. The ad hoc committee report is in fact complete. It was completed and presented the day of the PAC, which did not allow us to discuss it and review it. So it has been provided individually to the PAC members. We will comment on it and at our next meeting, so that's the agenda item to complete that, and bring to you recommendations for an engagement criteria and set of information that we still recommend that a communications specialist draft that actual communique, the method you use to use that, but include these items. And incentives and benefits are key to it because, as was pointed out, there's not a mandatory requirement at this point in time for them to register their wells nor to install monitors. So the message is very key, and we're going to bring those to you. During that process, a couple observations that were made and I'll get to them under a different one in a second. It comes on. Okay, second item or another agenda item was review meeting minutes approval, and that's not an issue for you to approve. The allocation status update we talked about before, so the ad hoc committee and the allocation ones are the two key, and the draft GSP chapter. And also I would like to add now a new task, perhaps, given the timeline of what you brought up with regards to the augmental or supplemental water supply tasking that perhaps you're going to give to members in an ad hoc committee of the PAC and the TAC, that be an agenda item, which means the staff has to address what the proposal is out of there so that we can assign folks right away if that is in fact what we want to do. with regards to the subject group that you all proposed, the Supervisor Gleason proposed in particular. So given the timeline, that doesn't give staff much time to make the determination and recommendation of which way you want to go in forming that board. But it's critical that allocation piece, or the imported water supplemental sources augmented, is one of many in parallel action items that are going in sequence and also in parallel to fill the GSP. So it's not the first one we're looking at. It's one of many, Director Vallejo. But we need to get it going because it's complex. Last couple items. PAC members want the board to know that overall we observe that Mr. Markman's presence and delivery at this meeting provided really greater understanding and trust and confidence in the process that the GA is undertaking overall. Individual PAC members made that statement, as did a few people from the public out in the audience. So the decision that the GA made to fund his visit and stay overnight, as well as the water resource manager, who also added to this credibility of this process, in our minds was well worth it. It was well worth the value of that. We understand that may not be able to happen at every subsequent TAC and PAC meeting, but we would request that at certain times, certain key times, that be continued, because the value far outweighs the cost, given the total cost of what we're investing in the GA to come up with this plan. What Mr. Markman is doing so far, in our opinion, since the first visit he made in September, is providing much more positive focus, understanding, relaxation of fears, and we'd like that to continue, but we won't ask for it every time. I think that's all I had. At this point, there was something I missed that I know members wanted me to bring up. As I tried to shorten it, I dropped it out, and I don't see it right now.
Thank you, David. Any questions from the board?
Just a quick question on the draft measure or letter to the well owners for registration. You did say you're going to go over that in more detail in the next meetings?
Correct.
And make it available. So any questions we may have on it right now, we can just hold off until in that meeting would be better?
Yeah, because the members haven't even done our review together on it yet, and it won't be a draft letter. It will have concerns and issues and specific talking points that we do recommend be in the letter, but it's going to take a communications expert. We have made, here's one of the comments that I can't find in here. Our observation is that we've done public outreach, we've provided a plan to the board, but the board overall, and we got public feedback to this as well, still is not achieving success with what we've done outreach-wise. And part of it has been things we chose not to do. Part of it is the way we communicated certain things, like the original fee communication, some of the meetings, et cetera. And that a good piece of that was, with some of the drafts that were released and documents that were released, was that a risk communication specialist did not draft them. They were focused on negative things. They got us off the bat in the wrong direction. And so as we gave you things in this one that would be positive and recommendations, we still think a specialist in communication strategy and how to make sure we're sending the right, correct, true message is important. That's why we are not, unless we change our minds at the next PAC, we're not going to draft that letter. But the content.
Yeah, I concur wholeheartedly, and so I'll hold off on this, and we can, bring it up at the next
Yes,
PAC.
sir.
Thank you.
Sean, did you have something?
So I believe I heard a request for agenda items regarding the additional ways to augment the water supply in the
that committee that you proposed staff to go off and study, that would be an item that the urgency, if the decision hasn't been made, you can't put it on the agenda. But I wanted to refresh you on, hey, if you want us to be in this committee, you have to tell us by that we both meet 2 weeks from now.
Okay.
Was there more?
Agree, Adam?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But is that something that
Yes,
the
I do agree.
water manager can get on your agenda? I don't know why not. Yeah? Steve, can you get something on their agenda to move ahead with that? Okay.
And any information that is discussed at these meetings, if we haven't done at the agenda items for both the PAC and the TAC, we won't have much of a conversation even on it because we don't have the information yet.
Right. Yeah. It seems like if there was a staff working group that if this was a standing agenda item for your committees and staff had made some progress and maybe involve some other PAC or TAC members or board members as well on an informal basis, that could inform the formal standing agenda items.
Yes, and we'll receive that from Steve.
Right. Okay.
When they're put together.
Okay.
Anything else? David, I want to thank you. One thing about that I believe about the PAC is I can't stress enough the outreach and engagement portion. There are so many things being stated that just aren't true. And we got to be able to rein them in, capture them, see how we can help correct that. And I, for one, as a board member here, will help you any way I possibly can. If you want me, I know outreach is important. I'm a firm believer that people that make comments without knowing the facts and studying it or coming to these meetings, it could be detrimental to us. So how do we get that out there? I know you can't force feed them. I know that.
Well, the GA previously had clarified to us that we are not doing the outreach. The GA's responsibility was to do the outreach. We were asked to advise them on that.
Recommendations.
We naturally do outreach when people engage us because they know we're on the PAC. However, that explicitly is the responsibility of the GA. When, for example, when a recommendation was made that perhaps some of us could be on the Speakers Bureau, which we recommended in the plan, that did not happen. Mm-hmm. And we are willing to do some of that. Obviously, we have not been tasked. We've been tasked explicitly not to.
But you do represent specific facets, such as the well owners and light industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that we do.
Yeah, you outreach
yes.
to your own group in some way or another. Yeah,
exactly.
To get their input. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Anything else? Anything for the public for the PAC? All right. We'll go ahead and close that section there. And I believe we are on to the General Manager's report.
I'll pare my report down from 4 pages to just a brief report.
Yeah, keep it.
Although I don't see him in the room, Ron is out in the hallway. I just want to acknowledge Ron Strand and Rika Charlon on behalf of Lauren and I for making a transition for the leadership role of staff from the city to the water district, a smooth transition. I just want to acknowledge them. That's it.
That's it?
That's it.
Boy, you win. All right. All right, I'll go ahead and open up for Director's closing comments. John, would you like to start?
Thank you all for putting up with my presence here, catching up to speed. I intend to obviously catch up to speed to a greater extent at every meeting that we come to and conduct. But I do want to, piggyback on this discussion of public outreach and the best ways to really engage with the public. And I've seen a number of articles in the local newspaper that appear to stress the idea of import saving the problems. And again, just from Inyo County's perspective, that is, a very involved and very complex issue. And if it's being promoted by anyone from the authority or our committees as the save all solution, that's obviously going to be very disappointing for a lot of folks at the end of the day, or maybe not obviously, but I expect it would be very disappointing for people at the end of the day if they expect that importing water will, solve all the problems. So I think we have to put some real thought into our communication strategy around these issues, and that will be, I think, further developed when we move forward with this augmentation list and developing that list. So again, thanks for having me, and I look forward to finding the best solutions that we can for all of the well owners and water users in this basin, because it's obviously critical that we reach an appropriate balance.
Thank you. Director Heyman?
No further comments. Thanks.
All righty. John, do you have anything? Nothing? Mick?
Yeah, a couple things. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things quickly. The TAC and the PAC meet regularly and at the Water District. Is that correct? They were meeting at the here, and now they're meeting. Can we get them to be scheduled here? And the reason I'm asking that is because I, by design, do not go to those meetings, but I do like to watch them. So, and I can't watch them if they're held at the water meeting. So I would recommend that we move the TAC and the PAC to here. Is that, does anybody have an objection to that?
Just to correct your statement, they've always met at the Water District.
Oh.
We've had a couple.
Yeah.
When there have been meetings that you anticipate a large crowd. Yes.
I'd like to move, I'd like to, I don't know if I can make a motion in closing comments. I don't think I can, because it has to be all that kind of stuff. But I would like to have the TAC and PAC moved here so I can sit back and watch them after they happen.
We did make recommendations at those ones where we had Mr. Markman that it be in here.
I'm talking about it all the time.
I know.
So I don't know how to go about that, General Manager. Do I need to put that on the calendar for next time with Mr.
Well, we heard you.
Okay.
According to the notes from the November meeting, staff was supposed to research the cost and availability and report back to the board, and I don't think that's been done.
Okay.
So
is it going to cost us anything to use this place?
That I don't know. We could look into that. Maybe Ron, being the general, city manager, he may be able to give us a little more direct.
Okay.
I'm not sure it'll be decided here, but I think it's noted, and it's something that the staff needs to work on.
But I think there will be minimal cost with respect to staffing the equipment to make that video occur.
Thank you. Thank you. Second thing is I just want to inform the public that and the board that the county initiated an ordinance review of all existing ordinances and non-existing ordinances in the county and how we can help in parallel to what we're doing here. For example, gray water analysis, gray water use. What do we do with gray water? Is there a better way to use that water? We talked about swamp coolers in the county. We talked about how do we go about moving from swamp coolers to some other form of environmental conditioning. I think that's a long process. It's not an easy nut to crack, but there are ways to do that, and I think it's imperative that's one of the things we take on. I'm sure it's going to be in the GSP, so we're looking at helping with that. And well analysis. We want to revisit the well analysis, and we're going to look at all the wells we got and develop a trend in the history. So we have other ordinances that we're working, and we will bring them as they develop back to the board for our review as the county decides to go forward this, or whether or not we do not. I know Ms. Breeden wants to come to closed session, and Ms. Breeden is an alternate on the board. And she's been patiently sitting there waiting, and I've always appreciated her support and her efforts in the GSA and what we do here. But before we get to the point of telling her yes or no, she can come to closed session or not, I'd like to have a legal analysis done by our county council and bring it back to us next month as to making a determination on whether it's appropriate that alternatives enter closed session with us or not. And if they are, then they all are. And if they're not, then they're all not. But could you come back to us and make us a recommendation in the February meeting?
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And my last comment, I'm going to thank the public for sitting through these, and I've said it before, these meetings are getting very lengthy. This meeting, the TAC meeting, the PAC meeting, but as Judy said, we have a lot to accomplish in a short amount of time. And I believe progress is beginning to take place. It may be sometime